You are now listening to the Sae Bae Cast, the #1 old school RuneScape podcast featuring guests from all across Galanor. To support this podcast, visit the Patreon link in the description.
All right, welcome to the Sae Bae Cast, number 127 with Mod Ed. Mod Ed, how are we doing this fine evening?
I'm doing pretty well, thank you.
I'm excited to talk. I've been a big fan of yours, honestly, for a few years now, and I think the work you've done for Jagex has been phenomenal. So I'm just going to give you a little round of applause, just a solo round of applause. You've done some great work.
Oh, thank you. It always means a lot because I'll be honest, I'm always very, very critical of my work. So whenever somebody's like, "Oh yeah, that wasn't too bad," I'm sort of like, "I'm not sure I believe you, but thanks all the same."
It's funny because like in the Q&A just earlier, you were literally saying like, you can't really toot your own horn, for the whole quest that just finished up. And it feels like nothing, as you said, once it's done, because you've just constantly been working on it just over and over and over and over and over. And when it's finally released, it's like nothing really special at that point.
It's like it's kind of sad in a way, I guess. But like, yeah, it's almost sort of like it's a relief. Like people always say, "Oh, what's the first feeling like after like launching something?" It's like a large part of it's just like relief. Like, okay, we're done. It's finally out there, and it's just you just get a small moment of relief. It doesn't last very long, so then immediately have to jump into post-launch fixes and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just like it's very hard to generally I get there in the end, like probably about like a few months after launch, once I've got over the horrors of whatever developing it was like. At that point, I can normally look back and be a bit more reflective on it. But no, initially it's just sort of like, thank God it's done.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. It must be a special feeling though, just like knowing it's done and now like a million people are going to experience. I don't know the actual number, but like a lot of people are about to experience it for the first time. And
It's always the anticipation, like, okay, what are they gonna think? Are they gonna like it? Are they gonna hate it? Are we gonna accidentally take the worlds offline and roll back before we even get to play it? Like, launch day of something is always a mix of emotions, and you never really actually, to be honest, on the day something launches, you never really get too much time on that day to actually really reflect too much, because generally, even when we have a really smooth launch, like there's always going to be a few things to fix here and there. So you're normally like too busy, like focusing on that side, making sure everything's working all right. But you never really actually get to sit back and like sort of see how it's going. So often sort of like comes like at the end of the day, like after work's done, like when finally like sort of see what are people saying about it. Do they love it? Do they hate it?
I bet that's like, and the community is very, I don't know. They love this game a lot. I don't know if loves, I mean, I guess love's the right word, but so they have very strong opinions and you guys have to deal with all of it. So do you worry sometimes? Like, are you more excited or more nervous on releases? Because I feel like inevitably there's going to be a small portion of players that's just complaining.
Yeah, it's like it there is always going to be someone that doesn't like it, and that is always going to be the person that is screaming and shouting the loudest. Like that's just how it goes. And like it's easy to say like, okay, yeah, sure. There's always going to be someone that hates it. Don't look at that Reddit thread. Don't worry about what people are saying on Reddit. Like, but you can say that as much as you want. You're going to bloody check anyway. And like that's always the one. That's always the one you remember. Like, oh, that one guy said this bit wasn't quite right. Like. There is always that, and like it is always like very nerve-wracking. Like I say, often it doesn't even come into like a few hours after the launch that you even like look for the first time and sort of see what people are saying, and it's always the first thing you see as well. Like if I open up like Reddit, which I shouldn't, stupid idea, but on launch day when I open up Reddit, if the first thread I see is negative, it doesn't matter if the next 10 ones I see after that are positive. I'm like, oh, but there was that first negative one. Like, oh, it wasn't quite right. Something wasn't quite right, and like. I know, like, I've been doing this for quite a few years now, at least quite a few quests. I know that you are not going to make everyone happy.
Yeah.
But all the same, you're always going to feel that pressure on launch day, and there's always that question of like, "Oh, could something just be a little bit better?"
Mm-hmm. So how do you feel at the end of Desert Treasure 2? Do you feel like you went all in and everything was left out on the table and you're good? Or was there little things that you're like, oh, I wish we had had a little bit more time to work on this?
I think you always want more time. Like I think if anyone says to you that they got to an end of a project and was like, yeah, I'm good, I'm ready to just sit back and relax and chill, it's like, nah, you're lying. Everyone wants more time, but like I I do think for DT2 it was close. It was close to getting everything to fitting everything in. But by the end of it, on the whole, I was sort of like, I think I think this one has everything that I want in it. Like I think it is in a place where it's good to go. Like I don't know if that makes it good, but about that's the thing. Like about as satisfied as I could get with it, which probably still is not too much, but yeah, it felt like again, I think I was going back to what I was saying earlier. Like, the biggest thing is sort of like relief. Sort of like, I think I've got everything I want in here. I think this is what way I want it. Let's just get it out there and see what people think. I think that's the thing as well. Like, you can keep tweaking forever, even if we didn't have the powers that be glaring down on us. Like, don't delay it. You can't delay it. You got to launch it. We've got money to be made. Like, even if they weren't there, like you at some point you just got to pull the trigger and release it because you'll
That's
drive
true.
yourself insane.
That's
Like,
true.
and I do I like sometimes the days like leading up to like sign off on a big project, sometimes the worst. 'Cause it's always just like, could I tweak this little thing? Could I tweak that little thing? And at some point you just have to go to yourself. You're banned. You're banned from actually opening up the game and looking at your work because you will find something else that you want to change about it. You gotta just put it in people's hands and
Yeah.
see what they think.
Okay, so I need to ask, what was your favorite part working on that quest? I do recall just earlier in the Q&A you were saying most likely the little shadow realm, and I actually have some other questions alongside that I'm very curious. I don't know how much you'll be able to share, but yeah, what was your favorite part of designing Desert Treasure 2?
Yeah, I do think it probably was the Shadow Realm section. Like there was a lot of things that I'd wanted to do for a long time, but I was able to get into this quest, and that was definitely sort of one of the ones that are up there. Like you mentioned, like on the Q&A, was saying that this was something I wanted to do for a very long time. Like it's just it's such a really fun bit of gameplay, both from the gameplay side of playing with it, and also from like the technical side as well of having like two different versions of the same area. There's so many things you can do, like with puzzles and that sort of thing, and indeed with boss fights. So we use it in the boss fight too, and it was something I've been wanting to do for years. And I had a very different idea initially. Like I had an idea for another quest, one that I don't. It's not one we've launched. I don't know if this one will ever launch. Like I've got all sorts of crazy ideas floating around for all sorts of quests. But there was this one quest that I had this idea for that delved into like time travel a little bit. And there was this idea of like having two different versions of the same area that you traveled backwards and forwards in time, doing different things in each one. And when it came to doing DT2, it's like, yeah, we've got to do it here. Like, it would be a missed opportunity not to. We've got a quest where we're doing shadow stuff. We've already got like this background, like lore that already exists about the Shadow Realm, like this parallel universe that's pretty much the same, which is a little bit different. Like, it'd be a missed opportunity not to take it. So I was like, all right, we're finally doing it. We're doing it here, and it was really it's the thing about like designing puzzles like that. It's almost like a puzzle in itself, designing it, like trying to piece everything together and like work out how it's going to work. And like honestly, like the earliest versions of it were horrifying. Like you would that's a thing people maybe never like fully realize that when we're making a quest, honestly, like the first draft of some of this shit it's just that shit. Like it's terrible. And maybe we sort of like refine it. But yeah, like I was really happy with how it turned out in the end. Like I say, some of the early versions, I was like, "Oh God, this is a good idea." It's not actually really playing very well. And like the thing I was worried the most about with that one is that would it just get tedious? Would it be something that feels like really cool initially, like, oh wow, switching my forward between two realms, but then after a while, just like, oh, now I've got to go back to this realm and do this because I can't do it in this realm. It just gets really boring and tedious. And like I think your first version probably was, but I think we managed to refine it into a good place in the end, and it came out like really well. And it's one of those things as well that it's such a cheat because I sort of rely on other people to make my work better. Like once we got the final art in, and once we got the audio in, like especially with the music track, that's when it all really started to feel like it was coming together. It's like, okay, brilliant. Maybe even if the gameplay is crap, people love it so much just because of how amazing the city looks and how cool this audio track is. Hopefully, I think people enjoy the gameplay as well. It's one of those things where the magic always happens where everything like comes together perfectly. Like you often get things where it's like we're making something and some bits are good, some bits are all right, some bits are bad, and like but ultimately if you add it all together, it probably still equals hopefully maybe a good product. But there's ones like that where it sort of felt like everything sort of came together and it really just like when the gameplay and the story are perfectly interconnected, like when the music is adding to it and the art is adding to it, and it all combine it all together, it just feels really special. And that I think we managed to do with the Shadow area, and I would say it was probably my favorite one as a result.
It's really cool. I loved it. And you guys did a good job with like the teleporters around the city. I think that made it a lot more not like it wouldn't have been bearable, but it feels like you're just getting around a lot quicker with those teleporters. So that was good.
Yeah, stuff like that. That was the stuff that was missing initially, and like there was also the on the fragment you've got the right click option to like recall all your devices and items and stuff like that. Like those are the things that were missing on like the first draft, and it's like we were like play testing it, and just like holy shit, you're bloody spending like 5 hours just running backwards and forwards, and like I mean to a certain extent that's the game. Like if you're playing RuneScape, you're gonna be ready for slogs here and there, but where possible you want to try and avoid like quests, I think. So yeah, stuff like that. That was the stuff that sort of came in a bit late. Like, how can we make this just a rip out the tedious parts and just focus on the fun bits for like the actual gameplay, the puzzles themselves?
Yeah. I'm first of all, I gotta say, I would absolutely be thrilled with a time travel sort of quest. Especially like I don't know if you've seen the film Christopher Nolan's Memento. Have you seen that?
Yeah, yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but I do remember like there's two different timelines that are going. And so even though it's not necessarily time travel, it would be interesting if you did a quest where like it switched timelines in a way where like you're seeing what already happened in the future, but you're still playing in the present, but it's like full of mystery. And then you meet up at like the middle of the story and it's like, oh, okay, like it all comes together.
Yeah, I really time travel is always super risky, and it's something I'm still quite keen to do. Even though obviously, like I say, we ended up stealing the idea for DT2 instead. I've still got this sort of like this quest in the back of our mind. It's sort of lingering there of like, can we do time travel well in RuneScape? Like I say that's like it's not the first time it's been done. Like RuneScape 3 has a couple of time travel quests. We don't have them in Old School, but it's like it's a concept that already exists in RuneScape in some form. But like it's always just so dangerous playing with time travel. But if you do it well, I think it works really well in video games as well. Like there's no bloody creativity here. Like this is all just stolen from other video games. Like there's a few great games out there that do time travel really well. Do literally the thing we're talking about, like jumping backwards and forwards between different realms that have done it like really really well. It's something that works really well from a gameplay standpoint. Time travel is definitely something I want to have a crack at some point.
That'd be cool. So, are there any Easter eggs in Desert Treasure 2 that are like hidden throughout the quest that people just like wouldn't find normally? Like, is that something you guys do at all?
We There was once upon a time we would like throw Easter eggs in and nobody would find them, and we'd have these Easter eggs where they'd go undiscovered for years. Nowadays, people are just too good now. Like the wiki guys, like they find things at the snap of the fingers, and like it doesn't help now that like people do a lot more data mining for cache a lot more than they
That's
used
true.
to. But even then, even if we like sort of like try and hide it, like oh, we could like hide it behind some other things, so it wouldn't appear obvious in the cache. They just sort of they find it immediately anyway. People are so good at finding things. Like I think everything we hid in DT2 got found pretty quickly. I think the biggest one was the you have a golem near the start of a quest where you have to like get the information out of it, and it was a bit of tech we got. We actually got it like years ago. The ability to this sounds crazy. You'd think it'd be a bloody simple one, but no, like the ability to actually for the player to enter freely enter text and the game respond in some way was actually a technology that we could not comprehend until a few years ago. We got it a few years ago and we never really used it. And RuneScape had used it for a quest. I can't remember the name of it now. Needle skips, I think it was. They'd used it for a quest where basically you type things in and it sort of like progresses the quest and you like discover things that way. And I was really keen to do one of those ourselves. Again, no creativity, just time stealing from RuneScape. I was really keen for us to do that, and that's what gave us the Garden of Death quest. And then after that, like we were already like designing DT2 while working on Garden of Death. I mean, ultimately, they ended up actually, sort of sharing some like storyline elements and stuff like that. So for the Golem, I was like, I'm gonna use that technology again. We've got it now. May as well use it. So actually, overplay like type stuff in, and then immediately from that, sort of like, oh hello, we're gonna let players type in whatever they want. There's a golden opportunity here. There's also terrifying stuff here for God knows what they'll bloody type in, and of course there was the meme, literally, I think on Reddit, literally a few hours after launch, of somebody going into the Golem and typing in I shouldn't even say it, but they typed in something about Jagex, and the Golem responds with no information found, and it's like, there we go. But it was also a really good opportunity for us to like hide lots of like little Easter eggs and stuff in there, and probably went way overboard. Like I think by the end of it, it was sort of like 70 or so different possible things you could put in.
Holy.
Just sort of like, and most of it doesn't really give anything notable. Like it's just stuff people already know. But it was a really good opportunity to sort of like just throw some like little lore tidbits in there. But then we also put a few fun ones in as well, like little Easter eggs for people to find. But if they found them all so quickly, we got to keep trying harder. People are just too good now at finding everything we hide in there.
Yeah, do you worry about that at all? Like, or are you okay with how the game is, where people literally find and just break down the game into little bits where like everything's just mapped out perfectly? There's tile indicators for everything. There's quest helper for everything. Like, how do you feel about all the plugins that we enjoy today?
Personally, I'm very back and forth on it. I'm very up and down. Like there was I saw a comment that I think sort of like captured it quite well, and how do I say this without accidentally just like crapping all over some people? I'm gonna probably accidentally do it anyway. Like it's not like we're very clear. Like I think it is really important that people play the game how they want to play it. Like at the end of the day, you're paying how much do we charge now? We've gone beyond the $11 meme. What is it, $12 or something? Crab meme. That sort of like people pay a decent amount for our game. Like they, if you're paying that much for a game, you don't to a certain level you don't want the game developer then turning around telling you how to play it, sort of thing. So like there's definitely a certain level of if people want to play the game how they want to play it, as long as it's not starting to interfere with other people's experience to a certain level, you kind of like let them. But at the same time, it's like, I guess on a more personal level, especially like with like some of the work I do, like around like narrative and stuff like that, it's often focuses quite heavily on exploration, like discovery and things like that. And sometimes it does sort of feel like a bit of a shame where everything now is driven by spreadsheets rather than exploration and discovery. And yeah, I saw this comment like soon after launch, sort of like captured it to a certain level. It's sort of like 20 years ago, back in the day, people would have loved a launch like this for the ability to just like go out and explore, discover things for themselves. But now there is sort of like, it feels a bit different. There is more of sort of an expectation of like there needs to be answers to everything. Like,
Yep.
and I don't know, it does feel like a bit of a shame. Like sometimes there might be things that are maybe a little bit lost there, but obviously that's just my opinion. Like, and ultimately, like I think the other thing as well is that again, like people can do it how they want to do it, and we should be careful not to get too upset about people doing it how they want to do it, because the people who want to explore things and discover things for themselves, they'll still do that, and they do still do that. Like we still get so many people, like even after this quest is added to Quest Helper, and there's like 57 Runelight plugins for it and that sort of thing. Well, there still will be people out there who'll they'll turn all that stuff off because they'll want to experience it that way. So like people still have that option; it's not taken away from them. And then other people have the option to do the spreadsheets, do the plugins, all that sort of thing.
Along those lines, what are your thoughts on the polling system and the freedom of, I guess, as like the development team, like the freedom of like developing something, but being almost enslaved to this like community that wants a certain thing? Like, how do you feel about the polling system in general?
Oh, that's a big one. We could be here all night just talking about the bloody plugins. To be honest, when it comes to influences, I'm probably one of the lucky ones, to be honest, because like we poll so much, and one of the few things that we don't poll is narrative. We don't poll where the story goes really on the whole. So I guess I'm sort of a lucky one in that my work generally hasn't. I generally have quite an easy time with a polling system, because when I'm polling something like talk to CM, it's like, right, what question are we going to have here? Well, we just have one question. Do you want to start this quest? If we're feeling in a good mood, we might tell them the requirements up ahead, but we don't actually even always do that. Like, do you want this quest that continues this storyline? No spoilers, so I'm not going to tell you anything about what happens in the quest. So I have it fairly easy with a lot of the work that I do, because like I get to keep secrets, which we don't normally get to do. Like for other things, I get why some people would be frustrated by it, both players and staff as well. Because like for some things that we poll, like you maybe do feel like you can't keep those secrets. Like sure, we can be secret of a storyline of a quest, but when we're adding new bosses and stuff like that, we can't just sneak a boss in. We can't just add a boss unannounced. Like that's not something we can do. And there's pros and cons to that. Like the polling as this system exists for a very good reason. Um, it's fair to say that Jagex made some questionable decisions once upon a time that led to a certain level of maybe mistrust between the players and Jagex. And I'm allowed to say that because I was a player back then. I'm shitting on a different Jagex, not the current Jagex. Current Jagex is good because current Jagex fixed that with the polling system. The polling system was the answer to that. Like, to basically bring players on the journey with Jagex. So like, no more will we be, driving the direction of this game ourselves. Like, it'll be a collaboration. Like, the players will also have a say in the direction of the game, and that is obviously so important. Like, the polling system was born for a very good reason, and like, as a result, it'll always have some sort of place in Old School. If we were to get rid of it, like, a lot of people would not be very happy. And I imagine a lot of those people would be internal people as well. People at Jagex would not be happy about that. And even today, we see now that the polling system is it's still, obviously, thankfully, we've never been silly enough to poll anything quite like UC or MTX these days. But even on a small scale, you still see it like protecting us from things that maybe like wouldn't have been as good without the polling system. A very good example, admittedly this one is from quite a few years ago now, so I say recently, not particularly that recent, but it is a good example of it, is when we polled the first version of the Inferno, I think probably before it was even called Inferno, where it's just like an expansion. Basically it was an expansion to a fight cave, just kept going after Jad, and people wanted something more unique. And then we came back again with a pitch for something that would be on Karend, I think it was, like where we ended up putting Mount Karum. There was another blog about something like that, and again people were like, well, no, that doesn't fix. It's not Zara anymore. Like that back and forth is what made the Inferno. Without that, we wouldn't have the Inferno. And the Inferno, I think most people would agree. The vast majority of us will never have any bloody hope of getting an Infernal Cape. It was a pretty damn good update. It was good for the game. Like it's still one of the additions that people remember really fondly. Like the polling system gave us that, because otherwise we would have gone with something that we thought was good, but would not have been as good as the Inferno. Like, and we've even like polled I guess more businessy things as well. Like we had the poll a while back about the a few years ago now, about like the partnerships of like get Twitch Prime and you'll get the reskin of your player and house, and like people obviously very clearly voted no to that. Like that people felt that was a step in the wrong direction. That it puts you on that slippery slope, as people call it, towards MTX. And obviously, like, no one at Jagex was of that mindset. Like, all the people like who were talking about this internally, no one was like saying like, oh, we can use this to like get towards MTX. It was a genuine like, this is maybe something we could do that old school players would get behind, that, you know, wouldn't be like MTX or that sort of thing. But people very clearly, resoundingly said, no, we don't want that. Like, Jagex pulled a business decision, and that there would have been money behind that. I don't know how much money there would have been, but, you know, we're not talking like small amounts of change here. We're talking about pretty hefty sums, and Jagex pulled it and it failed. So, like, when you look at things like that, like, there's obviously huge positives there. Then I guess on the flip side, though, like thinking about sort of, I guess, fairly recently with DT2, we've obviously had some ups and downs with DT2 and polling. We had the prayer stuff, of course, where we didn't even end up polling it, and there was obviously sort of like very lots of questions there about where who makes that choice. Like, we said ourselves in the blog of we reckon if we polled it, and, you know, we don't know for sure, but we reckon there was a decent chance that if we polled this, there'd be a reasonable chance of it passing, and that in itself was why we chose not to poll it, because we felt if it passed and went into a game, that it would not be good for the game. So we basically, and obviously we can't say for sure because we didn't poll it, but that was kind of us saying we're overruling here. We're overruling the players. We think this will pass a poll, but we think you guys would be wrong to vote yes to this because this is not right for the game. You know, there was a lot of questions about that. There was a fair few nice comments, of course, about what we were doing and why we should or shouldn't be doing it. So, like, there's that sort of side of debate there, and then also there's the stuff about like what should and shouldn't we poll. Like, we recently, like very shortly before launch, polled the awakened versions of the bosses, and one big bit of feedback we got was, you shouldn't have polled this. This would have been an amazing surprise, and that was actually a conversation we had internally. Like, should we poll this or should we surprise people with it? And it's sort of like, well, we can't surprise with it. Like, yeah, technically it does fall into a slight grey area. There's like there's content we've already polled. We've already polled these 4 bosses, which are making harder versions of them. So have we kind of already polled it? But no, not really. It's different enough that they're kind of like, they're not the same 4 bosses. We're adding new stuff to them, like new mechanics, and like we're changing things about them and adding a new reward as well. We'd need to poll that. We wouldn't be able to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
But then you've got people going, this would have been more fun and more interesting had you kept it a secret. So I've been talking about for a while now. I've not really answered your question. I think there's probably not really a good answer. That's the sort of a cheat that conclusion I've come up to here to get away with ever trying to answer this question properly, is that there's no good answer really. We've gone back and forth on this loads of times at Jagex, and the polling system has pros and it has cons, and it's always just that question of do the pros outweigh the cons, and it's one of those ones where it's impossible to actually know the answer to that. Unless we took away the polling system and gave it a go without the polling system. You'd never know if the pros outweigh the cons, and if it went wrong, we'd all know pretty damn quickly, and it might be a little bit too late then. Based on past experience of why the polling system exists in the first place. So yeah, so like, you don't get awakened bosses a surprise, but on the flip side, you get to have this huge say in the direction of a game, and even in some cases, a say on big business decisions that could make Jagex potentially a lot of money. And we put that in the hands of the players. Like, it's all about that weighing it up, I guess. And I think the answer probably changes on the situation as well. Like, probably day by day, the answer probably changes. Is that a good or a bad thing?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because I've talked to a few JMods, and it's always the same kind of thing where the polling system's good, but it's got its cons. I think this is me kind of becoming a lot more like just free with the game and trying to really capture what's fun about the game. That's what I'm like really wanting, is like updates that are fun. I think we should. I'm not saying we should all do this, but as me as a player, I'm very much in the category of like, is this going to be a fun update? That's what I want. So I think what would actually be kind of cool is to like poll It's just like have a poll question saying, can we design something unpolled? Like basically like a poll for we're going to come up with something that we think is going to be awesome, but we're not going to share any of it with you. Are you okay with that? And then we would vote on that. So then it's like you do have that freedom within some limits, you know, where it's like we're going to come out with one thing completely mysterious, but we're polling that in the first place. Because I do think there is something to be said about just like having an update come out that you have no clue what's coming your way, basically.
Yeah, it's like it is. Yeah, it's the one thing that we probably do maybe now lack a bit of is that the surprise element of things, like not knowing what's coming, and there's a certain level of also with polls, I guess less polls of all like the blogs behind them, and that in some cases it turns it from a video game that is meant to be fun, meant to be a bit of escapism, to like where it's almost like for the players it becomes a job as well. Like we're making them do work. So like, okay, we put this blog out now. You guys have all got to go and get your spreadsheets. I because I was saying about spreadsheets. We kind of encourage it ourselves, like people to get their spreadsheets out. We encourage this different way of looking at the game. Like we ourselves sometimes risk taking that fun out because before the update is even launched, before it's even maybe even started development, people are already trawling through numbers and trying to work out if something is right for the game or not. And you know, it's important to make sure we do things that are right for the game, but it is a game. Like if people are spending so much time worrying about this, that, and the other, you very much risk not having fun anymore.
Yep. Yeah, that's so tough. It's got to be really tough for the devs as well. I mean, you like you said, like you're just the narrative guy, so you don't really have to deal with all those limitations. Quick question on Ruinous Powers. How did that all come? Like, how did the final decision come about? Did you guys like jump in a meeting? Because clearly there was a lot of back and forth between the community and you guys, and just trying to come up with a good spot for this prayer book. And then it was actually a pleasant surprise for me and a lot of players, obviously, that the prayer book just got scrapped. But how did that final decision get made?
It was it was after we launched the second beta, and we'd already said to ourselves like after the first beta we did, like we did the first beta, reception was mixed. It's fair to say. And we even after that we had a conversation like, do we keep going? Is this the right thing to do? Is this like, are we going to be able to pull this off? And we actually had a conversation about of should we actually stop now or should we keep going? And in the end we came to a conclusion like we should keep going. We shouldn't like we need to be very mindful of the fact that this may well not work at this point, but we should at least try. Like we did our first poll, back to polls again. We did our first poll for it straight after the Winter Summit, and that was obviously just sort of like a green light poll, no details. Like, would you be interested in us exploring this? And I can't remember the exact number. It's like is 80 something like 85% or something around there. Like that's a fair chunk of people like saying that we want you to explore this. And had we just stopped after the first beta, it would sort of feel like fallen at the first hurdle, not even properly trying. So we said we're gonna keep going. We're gonna give it another go, make some changes. We'll do a second beta, second blog, and we said then that if that doesn't work, we'll pull the plug then. So going into that second beta, we had an idea that this may well be the end for these prayers, and we put the beta out and like pretty much like straight away. So the feedback was it was very mixed. And the thing that really stuck out about the prayers, probably far more so than anything that I can remember us polling, is just that there was a lack of consensus. And that was actually one of the things that was sort of really important. That generally when we poll something, that there is some sort of consensus. Obviously, not everyone is going to agree on everything, but there's some sort of consensus amongst people. Sort of like, these are the good bits, these are the bad bits. But we were seeing threads on Reddit of one person going, this is the best thing ever. And then in a comment below it saying, this is literally going to kill the game. Like, it was so polarizing. And that was one of the things that sort of really stuck out to us. So like, this is so polarized. Like no one is in agreement on this, and from that we went back and we sort of like said, why are we doing this? What is our aim with these prayers? And we went back and we looked, and here's the targets we initially set on these prayers. Here's the goals we set out, and we shared them in the first blog as well. I'm pretty sure, like with players, like that. This is what we want these prayers to do. And we came to a realization, looking at it, sort of like we are so far away from this original goal now that no wonder there is no consensus. Like this prayer book has gone through like such a journey that it is something totally different from what was originally pitched, and we just can't move forward with that. Like that's just it's too dangerous, to be honest. Like it's no longer doing what we set out initially, and that might be fine, but to determine if that's fine, we'd have to go like completely back to the drawing board and things like that. So we came to a sort of realization like we have not been able to successfully deliver on our original goals for this, and we've sort of started. We've reached a point where we're throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. We've tried everything. We've tried making the prayers super powerful, making them super niche. We've tried bouncing against the current prayer book, making them totally different. We've tried prayers that are like boosts above the current ones, or prayers that are completely different, and none of it's really fully landed. And no one is in full agreement on any of this stuff, and it's just not working. So we had a meeting, I think literally the morning after that second beta went out, and we said, look, this isn't working. This isn't what we set out to do. And we set out to do something very specific for clear reasons. And even if we can make something, even maybe if we can make something good at this point after like God knows how many more iterations, if it's not achieving that original goal, then we need to take a step back and really start over. And so that was the decision that was made, that no door is ever closed forever. Never say never. We are open. Like, and I think I said myself like earlier on the Q&A we were doing earlier today that I am still personally I've not given up on new prayers for old school, but Ruinous Powers of Desert Treasure 2 was not going to work. Like that, it just became so clear to us that it was just not going to work. And do we pull something that we know isn't going to work? Like, how does that work around the polling system? And we came to the answer that like the polling system, it exists to guide us and to stop us from making the wrong choices. But if we already know we've made the wrong choice, we kind of have to nip it in the bud sooner. So yeah, that was the call. And again, I'm still really hopeful that we find a different avenue to bring some sort of new prayers in. There were some great suggestions, like from like both inside Jagex, but also some great suggestions from players as well, like on Reddit and stuff like that, for different directions new prayers could go in. So I think there might still be legs, but yeah, it wasn't right to do them here, and yeah, hence the fun, difficult conversation on Thursday morning. It would have been. It was a day after the update.
Yeah, that was unexpected, but again, as I said, it was pleasant for a lot of us. There's a lot of people that still want to see a prayer book. In your personal opinion, what would you like? Do you have any thoughts on what you would want to see from a prayer book, or anything, at least like aspects of it that you thought were cool, of like ideas you've seen from others?
There was a proposal posted by someone on Reddit around that same time. I can't remember if it was before or after we made the decision to cut it, but there was a proposal, and I can't remember what it's called, like God alignment or something like that, where it's basically like you have your standard prayer book, and then there's like a set of 4 like bonus prayers, and those are ones that you swap in and out. So rather than swapping out the full prayer book like spell books work, it'd be like you have your core prayer book, and this is the same no matter what. Everyone has these same prayers, nothing changes there. And then at the bottom, there's like 4 extra prayers that can be swapped in and out, more like a spellbook kind of, like, there'd be 4 Zerosian ones that you'd unlock from Desert Treasure 2 or something like that. But then you could also do like 4 ones themed around Seren and the elves and lock it behind Song of the Elves and that sort of thing. There could be like different places you could unlock these like different god alignments to just have a few prayers, and that really stuck out to me. Obviously, we're not really particularly explored it yet, but that was something that stuck out as like that one could have legs if we want to reignite the prayer conversation, which again I am hoping we do at some point. that might be a really good way to go.
Yeah, I think honestly that's probably the best move. Like it's just so hard to fundamentally change what we're all used to for 20 plus years with the standard prayer book. And plus we literally saw like there's metas that are like incorporated with all pieces of content with the standard prayer book. And so like you guys were trying to do, you're trying to add all these prayers that are already in the standard prayer book, like redemption and these things that would keep these metas going strong. It was just so hard to balance because so much of this has been just completely figured out through spreadsheets and stuff of what's the best meta. And yeah, I honestly, I really like the God alignment idea. I think anything that's like keeping the core of the prayer book and then adding some cool little additional things is like the way to go.
Yeah, like I think one of our biggest mistakes, to be honest, was we approached it like we would approach adding a new spell book, and it's just completely different. Like they're not even remotely comparable. No spell book has anything like protection prayers. Like it's just like it's not comparable. Straight away, it just completely changes what you're trying to do. Like with a spell book, it doesn't matter if you're completely ditching all the old ones and getting new ones. Like because no spell is that plays such a fundamental part of the game. Like core combat, the entire game is built around the current prayer book, and like it was just never going to be possible to actually rip that out and put in a different one. We were always going to have to just basically copy and paste half the prayers. Otherwise, we'd have just half the game just would not have worked with that new prayer book. So yeah, that's why the God alignment sort of sticks out. Something like this got real potential. It's like embracing, like, accepting that the prayers are a core part of the game. You can't ever change them. But we can add little layers on top of different things here and there. And yeah, I do personally hope that we revisit that at some point. And I think the important thing is that, and I guess this is sort of a difference between taking the player hat off and putting the developer hat on. Of thinking about the fact that we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. We've been going on a while, and this is just obviously the old school version. RuneScape's whole been around for 20 years. That we've got time. Like, this is an MMO. Like, this is a game that's constantly evolving. This isn't like releasing the latest AAA title and then like never looking at it again. Like, we have opportunities to do things in the future that bring life to old piece of content. So there's no reason to say as to like when we come to have that conversation, whatever it may be, that they can't stand up being rewards from Desert Treasure 2. Like that would be completely fine. In fact, I imagine that would probably be a really good way to go.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think you said it well. Like this game has got a lot of life in it, and obviously there is no real rush for a lot of these things. I'm going to take a step back and just kind of ask you about your introduction into RuneScape and then how you how you ended up at Jagex basically and how that all transpired. So if you just want to like take me back to the beginning of when your whole experience with RuneScape began, I want to hear it.
Yeah, so to be honest, mine's not a particularly exciting story because it's probably the same as the vast majority of people. That like everyone else, as I played RuneScape when I was younger, like because back then it was everywhere, like sort of like 2006, 2007, that sort of era. Everyone was playing RuneScape, so sooner or later you were playing it as well. So like some friends at school were playing RuneScape, and they're like, see them playing RuneScape, oh, what's that? And then before you know it, you're playing it as well. So yeah, like everyone else, I was there playing it back in the day, and like everyone else, completely and utterly rubbish at the game. No, there was no talk of infernal capes or spreadsheets back then. We were all just kids, so no bloody idea. It's absolute insanity just how stupid we all were as children. Like we could not play this game to save our lives. Like I remember like when finally like picking it up again of like Christ, like these quests that took like weeks to complete as a child, like now you're just doing them in an hour, even without getting the bloody spreadsheets out. Like, so yeah, that was sort of obviously how it started for me. And to be honest, even back then, like it was the quests were always the thing that I loved the most. And in 2007, obviously the game took an interesting turn with like the removal of the wilderness, and for a lot of people, that was already where the game, like even back then, was starting to not be the RuneScape they wanted anymore. But I guess I was sort of in a bit of a different boat with it. For me, that was actually where some of the things I was most interested in started ramping up a bit, because it was around that same era that they started working on all the big quests, like while Gothic Sleep's like 2008, I think, and they were already sort of like hinting at it in late 2007. So like that was where a lot of the stuff I was interested in started to like really pick up. So I actually ended up playing RuneScape for a bit longer than a lot of other people that I knew. They sort of like dropped out around like 2007, around the wilderness stuff. But I kept going for quite a while longer because like the quests are like interesting me. Like we're really getting into the fun, meaty ones like the Marjarat quests and the big Grandmasters, like I say, Wild Goat Sleeps Ritual of the Marjarat. So I kept playing for quite a while after that, and even to be honest, I was still sort of playing a bit, not as much, even by the time EOC came around. But in the end, it sort of like I guess dropped off for me. So it's quite interesting for me in that Old School didn't necessarily immediately jump out to me as something that I would be particularly interested in because I was more interested in the quests, and Old School didn't obviously have that. I just had the quests from back in the day, but didn't have any of the new stuff. Old School didn't actually immediately appeal to me when it came out. I was still sort of like playing through the quests in RuneScape, but in the end, I lost interest in RuneScape. I lost interest in the quests they were doing, and things like with most people, like the change to EOC, all the change to the game, like the MTX, the heavy focus on like the daily stuff. Sort of lost my interest there, and then a few years after that, I say a few years, can't be actually that far after that. That RuneScape with Old School came out in 2013, so it'd only been a couple of years after that actually. Be around would have been late, like mid to late 2015, I think. One of my friends was like, "Right, I've suddenly got this crazy urge to just suddenly play RuneScape again." Like, all right, fair enough. Let's give it a go. So at that point, look, that's when I actually first started playing Old School. So like the late comer to the party when it came to Old School. Like I say, only not until 2015, like a couple of years after it launched, actually playing Old School with this friend of mine, like playing through like the early quests and stuff, like all the free to play stuff, and then the nostalgia finally hit, and it's sort of like. Then, like I say, always some realization like, oh wow, we were really crap at this game back then. I can speed through it now. Um, and my friend soon lost interest, but my interest sort of like stuck around as I sort of kept playing. Sort of like you know what, I'm gonna go get my Questcape again, gonna re-experience it and get the Questcape back. So that was sort of my initial goal. And around the same sort of time, I'm in my second year of university at this point, and it's about that time I need to actually start thinking about what I want to do with my life. And I knew, to be honest, even then I wasn't like 100% set on going into games, but it was sort of like I knew it was probably sort of like one of the thing that I probably did want to do. So like thinking about like what would be the best gateway into that, and the obvious one seemed like was okay. There's companies out there that do internships. Is there an internship available? So I didn't actually specifically necessarily look at Jagex first. Like I was just sort of like browsing around the internet, sort of like looking at jobs available and seeing if there's any companies that would do any internships to sort of like try and give me sort of like a leg up into the industry, to sort of like do an internship end of second year and then finish my degree, and you hopefully use that as a good way to hopefully get a actual job. And it just so happened that Jagex were doing internships that year. So like it was one of the websites I came across, and it's sort of like, oh, I've got to at least apply to this one. Started playing RuneScape again. Been playing it since I was a child. Let's give it a go. And no, honestly, back then I had no idea what that was going to lead to. The job description was I'll be honest, it was not the best worded job description in the world. I'll be frank with Jagex. It didn't actually say what specifically the job was for. It said it was a QA internship at Jagex, but it did not say where at Jagex. So it's all like it could have been for Old School, it could have been for RuneScape, it could have been for whatever whatever game that didn't release was being worked on at that time, because Jagex are quite good at doing that. And I applied, and I completely forgot about it. Like I've this would have been sort of like end of 2015 at this point, so like November, December time. I applied, completely forgot about it. It's like didn't hear anything for ages. So sort of like just assumed, oh well, clearly I wasn't right for them. Cool, let's keep cracking on, see if we can find something else. And it wasn't until like quite a few months later, it must have been like March or maybe even April of 2016, so like a good like 3 or 4 months after I applied, suddenly out of nowhere just get this call. It's like, oh, you applied for one of these internships. We'd like to invite you for a phone interview. I'm like, Christ, I completely forgot to apply for that internship. All right, cool. We'll have a phone interview. So I had a phone interview with Mod John C and Mod Kieran, and I remember coming off the phone interview and thinking, well, that was fucking shit. They're not going to fucking hire me after that. And indeed, I didn't hear anything for must have been another month after that. Another month not hearing anything. It's like, okay, clearly I did not give a very good interview. They clearly don't want me. And then another like month after that, get another phone call. It's like, oh, we really loved your phone interview. We'd love to invite you down to the office in Cambridge for a face-to-face. Like, oh, all right then, fair enough. So go down to the office, go down to Cambridge. My first time visiting Cambridge. Never been to Cambridge before. Drove down to Cambridge and to the Jagex office, and that was obviously back then. It was obviously quite a surreal experience because like I've seen the Jagex office in like live streams and stuff like that. I've seen some of the faces, like like everyone knew who Mod Ash was, including myself. Sort of like it was quite a surreal experience, like walking into this Jagex office, sort of like the game that I played as a child, and now I'm here in the building, and there's faces here that I sort of like semi kind of recognize.
Damn.
Yeah, it was a very surreal experience, and had the interview. There's 3 of us. They interviewed 3 of us at the same time for the same role, and they sort of very much pitted the 3 of us against each other. We had to do some like various like QA trials. We got given a broken version of Dragon Slayer 1 and had to play through it and like find the bugs. And we also got, I'm trying to remember, it's so long ago now. We also got shown some images of like pictures of like things like Cerberus and stuff, and like point things out in them. We had to do some teamwork exercises for 3 of us together. And then we had a face-to-face interview with
You had to gang up on one of them.
we had a face-to-face interview with Mod Matt K, Mod John C, and a couple of others whose mod names I forget. They did QA on the RuneScape side, and they absolutely ripped into us. They ripped us to bloody shreds. So they did not go easy on us. And I got to the end of that, and I was like, ah, that was fun. And I think I did absolutely bloody shocking once again. So it was a good run. I got to visit the Jagex office. That was nice. Like something to tell my friends about. It's like, yeah, I get to go see the place where they make RuneScape. But nothing else is coming out of this. One of the other 2 must have done better than me because I did absolutely shocking. And another like month or 2 goes by. We're into like must be into like getting into May at this point. So around the time you'd be sort of starting to think about when you'd be starting your internship, and I've not heard anything, so I've assumed it's just not worked out. At that point, sort of something like, well, I didn't bloody get an internship, so now I'm going to start thinking out some alternate summer job, working in a local shop or something. Not quite the same thing, but hey ho, need to make some money. And then I get a phone call. They're like, we've got some good news for you. We'd like to offer you the job. I remember in my head thinking, Jesus fucking Christ, it's only taken like 6 months and you keep bloody leaving me hanging thinking I've not got it. But obviously at that point, I'm sort of like, very quickly that pushes that to the side. It's like, okay, why the hell did it take so long? But at the same time, I've just been offered a job at bloody Jagex. So, unsurprisingly, I accepted the offer. And then it was literally only a few weeks later. Like I say, the process took so long. It was only a few weeks later that ended up like actually starting. And I remember being very foolish and probably a bit naive. Sort of like, this is a summer internship, and they basically said that they can be quite flexible. We can do something like as long as your summer is. So like, I need to get the maximum amount out of this. And I was going on holiday with some people from uni to Vietnam for quite an adventurous holiday, doing all sorts of activities. And I was like, okay, I'm going on holiday to Vietnam. I get back on like I can't remember what day it was. Like, I get back on the Tuesday. So yeah, I'll start on the Wednesday. Like that was pretty bloody stupid of me, because of course I was completely and utterly jet lagged, having spent 2 weeks in Vietnam. I was like, no, I'll start on the Wednesday, no worries. So I flew back in on the Tuesday. Went back to my student accommodation. I went to university in Lincoln, which is about like 2 hours away from Cambridge. Went back to my student accommodation, grabbed all my stuff. Bye everyone. See you in a few months. Hopped in my car, drove down to Cambridge. By the time I got to Cambridge, it must have been about 2 a.m. Like, I was like, right, quick nap, start work the next day, no problemo.
Oh no.
I did indeed start work the next day, and I was very, very bloody tired. But I was like, I can't bloody miss a day of this. So I like, right, yep, this is my start day, and I'm going to go right through until literally like, the bloody day before I have to be back at uni again. So yeah, that was how my journey at Jagex began, and then yeah, obviously had the internship. Did the like 3.5 months, however long it was, through to the end of summer. Like worked on what were we working on back then? Like I think Catacombs of Karen was like literally the first thing I was looking at. That launched literally the day I started at the company, I think. Then we had Skatizo the week after. The Master Clues, I think it was, for Kieran's first dev project. He literally, Kieran had just moved from QA to dev at that point, so there wasn't actually any. When I joined as an intern, there wasn't actually any proper QAs. There was Mod John C, but he was already sort of like acting in a more of like a leadership producery kind of role, like a hybrid role. So he wasn't actually doing too much QA. And Mod Rock, Kieran's backfill, didn't actually join until the week after I started. So for a few days, the intern was the only QA on the team, and I'm sure Reddit can make some fun memes about that one. Yes. Like started off like testing Master Clues, and had Last Man Standing, Player and House update, and then finished off with the big one, the one that everyone still bloody remembers me for, and I really wish they fucking didn't, which is the Winter Todd. Because if anyone has watched any Q&A or anything like that with me, they'll know I absolutely bloody hate it. Like, obviously, sort of I don't know, how hard are you meant to crapple on your own work? Like, there's a certain level of healthiness there, of, like, not being an arrogant, stuck-up bastard who thinks everything you've done is brilliant. But maybe it's sort of slightly unhealthy how much I shit on the Winter Todd as well. But like, Jagex, they were sort of like, we want to make sure you get everything out of this. And I'll be fair on them, because I've shat on them a lot so far of the whole interview process. The interview process was not brilliant, but once I got there, they were absolutely brilliant. Like, they were great, and they were sort of like, we want you to get the most out of this as possible. Like, obviously you're here as a QA intern, that's sort of like the primary role, but we want to give you opportunities to do other things. So we want to give you a chance to like design some stuff. What do you want to design? I was like, I like quests. Can I design a quest? And they were like, no, we don't do quests. It's like Monkey Madness 2 was the only quest Old School had done back then, and they're still like, quests were a pretty new thing for Old School, but Old School wasn't quite ready to start delving into that area yet. So it's like, you could, but quests, we're not really too sure about how we do quests yet. So maybe something else. We've already got this thing here. We've got this Winter Todd that we've already like blogged and polled. We blogged and polled it, but we didn't have any design for it. Trying to have a crack at designing it, so I did. And this isn't an experienced game developer designing a piece of content. This is the QA intern having a crack at designing a piece of content, and yeah, it turned out all right. It was okay. I hate it. It's okay. Some people love it. It's still the main place people go to fire making.
Yeah.
And if you say East Side, West Side, even now, bloody all these years later, everyone immediately knows what you mean, and like. And now I have to feel bad because I'm responsible for all that crap as well. But yeah, and then finished the internship, and I remember my last day was RuneFest, which was quite a nice sort of like bowing out, because I got lots of players coming up to me and sort of like, "Oh, really hope you come back," and all that sort of thing. And yeah, then back to uni, and and I think like it wasn't that long into uni, like a couple of months sort of back at uni again, and a role went up for a QA role, and this time the job description specified it was on Old School. I was like, brilliant, full-time role, I'll apply for that. And I didn't actually finish my degree. I didn't actually complete the year. I went back to Jagex again for the full-time role, less than a year later, and
That's
yeah.
that's awesome though. I think that's like that. So now you've been at Jagex for how long? Full time?
So full-time will be oh God, what will it be? Must be 6 years now. 6 years. 6 years back in April, I think it was. That's when I rejoined.
Wow.
And yeah, most of that in a developer slash design role. Like it was literally like my second day back in the full time role, and John C comes up to me and he goes, "We're opening up some content dev roles. Do you want to apply?" I'm like, "I've only been back 2 days." He's like, "Yeah, but you probably do a good job of it, and probably be an easy hire for us." So like, all right, fair enough. So yeah, literally a couple of months in, I applied for that. Say he was telling me on literally like a second day back, applied for that, and then became moved into dev, and yeah, been there ever since.
That's so cool. So what got you into like the senior narrative sort of position there?
So I was very, to a certain extent, I was very lucky in that, like, as I said, like I always like really quests were one of the things I enjoyed the most about the game. Like the story was always one of the things that really interested me. It kept me playing long after a lot of other people had stopped playing, like back in the original like era of RuneScape. And when I joined and moved into this like say started off in QA briefly when I rejoined, then very quickly moved into the developer role. And Monkey Madness had been out long enough then that Jagex was sort of a bit more open to having a conversation about what do we keep doing quests in Old School, what do quests look like. Monkey Madness 2 performed really well, like it did some really good numbers, and there are a lot of questions like, is that just because it's the first one we've done? Can we repeat that? Like, is questing something we should be doing? At that point, things were very, very different with regards to Old School back then internally at Jagex. Obviously, shouldn't say too much, but it's fair to say that Jagex as a company had a very different perspective on Old School back then to what it does now. We were very much we were the weirdo sat in the corner. We weren't what Jagex was about. Jagex was about making RuneScape. RuneScape's the big game for Jagex. Old School is just this little thing on the side, and I think there was even a couple of people who kind of almost like resented what Old School was. They're sort of like, Old School shouldn't be making money. It's not right that it's making money. Why would the old thing be making money? Like that doesn't make any sense. So like, there was very much sort of a perception back then that RuneScape is the main game. Old School is the weird spin-off, and like the idea of Old School starting to write their own quests that would take the story in a different direction was an alien concept that nobody was ready to talk about. But I was very, I was always very keen. I was sort of like, I want to do quests, and when you think about nostalgia, quests make a huge part of it. Like like the ones I was saying about before, like even the people who aren't that into quests, you say the name Wild Gothic Sleeps, they probably know it. Like this is stuff that like was meant something to people, and when you look back at the original days of RuneScape, they were releasing more quests than anything else. So we're talking about a game that is built on nostalgia like Old School. It can't actually be truly Old School without quests. And so I was very keen, very early on, to like, we need to do more quests. And nobody, like, people like had interest in quests. There's people on the Old School team who wanted to do quests, but no one was really sure where to begin. No one really had too much like knowledge of the backstory of the game and stuff like that. Like I say, there's lots of concerns as well about, could we be writing our own quests? Surely we should, if we're doing quests, surely they should just be like RuneScape quests, or best like Monkey Madness 2, where we just make a quest that doesn't exist in RuneScape at all, so we can tell a completely different side story. So there's lots of like questions about that, and it's sort of what basically ended up happening was I was like, okay, I need to present something. I need to give them something to try and get backing on making some new quests for RuneScape. And at the time, I was still in the QA role at the time. I'd already applied for the dev role, sort of like going through the interview process. But I was still just doing QA back then, so there was no time in like my actual work day to do it. So I remember I sat down at home. I say home. Back then I was on a just straight out of uni on a QA salary, living in Cambridge, which is like something like the third most expensive city in the UK or something like that. It is not a cheap place to live, and on a QA salary, it wasn't really a home. I was living in a box. Is probably a better description of it. It was a singular room. You could from the bed you could just about reach the kitchen sink sort of thing. That kind of, it was not a very big room. So one weekend I just sat there for the whole weekend. In the space of 2 days, I wrote a complete design document for a little quest called Dragon Slayer 2, and again, things are done very differently back then. Old School was like I was saying, it's sort of like the weird stepchild sat in the corner. No one really knew what to do with it, so we were kind of left to our own devices a bit. And so the way we pitched content and additions to the game was a lot more informal than it is now. Basically, what happens like once a year, Matt Kay would gather everyone, take us to an offsite at the local Hilton, just sit everyone down in a room and go, "What cool things should we add to the game?" And people would sort of like present pitches on what they thought would be good for the game, and then sort of like decisions led by Matt Kay would sort of be made on what would be the good or bad things to do. And this is sort of like, again, why I say I probably got quite lucky here with sort of like how a lot of this stuff turned out. I just so happened that no one was as interested in quests as me. I sort of joined the team at the right time where there wasn't as much scrutiny on what Old School was doing. Like there was not as much worry about sort of like the businessy side of it and how much money we were making. These were sort of like lesser concerns back then. So it allowed a junior QA to go to this meeting where stuff was pitched for the year and just go, "Here's my pitch for Dragon Slayer 2." And there must have been something in it because the entire team absolutely loved it, and they were like, "We have to do this. We are greenlighting this as the next quest we do." Okay, cool. The quest
Wow.
needs a developer, and it can't be me because I am a junior QA analyst who has admittedly, yes, applied for a dev role, but even if I get the dev role, I'll be a junior developer. You cannot give a tentpole to a junior developer. We'll get Ash to make it. Ash will make Dragon Slayer 2. And basically, fast forward a few weeks, I've moved into the developer role and got through training, and it has become apparent that Ash does not have the capacity to make this because there's other things he needs to work on. He can support it, he can help in like a supporting role, but he does not have capacity to make it. Another developer needs to be put on this project. There is only one developer free. It is the developer that designed it. So they gave a tentpole project to their brand new junior developer, which is not something you should really do. And yeah, so there I was as a junior developer working on the biggest quest that Old School ever done at the time. Really, only like by then we'd done a couple more. We'd done a couple of novice quests, but they were kind of cheating a bit. You know, one of them was turning a holiday event into a bloody quest, and a couple of the small little things here and there, including a couple I actually made in my like personal development time. I actually ended up making a couple of small ones for Corrend as well. So they were actually technically the first quests I launched, even if not the first ones I actually designed. But for all intents and purposes, like the first big one since Monkey Madness 2, and they're trusting it with the junior developer, and it really probably shouldn't have worked, but somehow amazingly it launched, and it's kind of awkward now because now that was always what sort of like kick-started it all. After that, that sort of like obviously it wasn't until like many years later when I actually became senior narrative designer. That was only happened this year, very recent addition of like title change. But to be honest, from that point on, it was sort of like general consensus from both Jagex and from a player base that Ed is now the lore guy, and he does quests. And yeah, it all came from this situation that really probably should never have happened. Like a junior QA probably shouldn't have been designing a big Grandmaster quest. They probably shouldn't have been developing it as their first project. So normally when we have new developers, their first projects are like holiday events and stuff like that. We
Yeah.
start off with something small, and that's what I was meant to be given. It was meant to be a more experienced dev taking this, but the availability was not there. So yeah, it got given to me, and then I had to go on stage at RuneFest and announce it.
That
Uh,
was awesome, by the way. Awesome presentation. I still remember that.
like that that day, just absolute insanity. Because my experience with the community up to that point was as the awkward ginger guy on the Q&A, because obviously everyone immediately picks out the hair color more than anything else. Like, oh, is that fucking? It's a mini boaty, dinghy, as people would sometimes say. Uh, And then it's like, okay, well now you've got to go on stage and just talk about Dragon Slayer 2. It's like, okay, but I'm not good at that sort of thing. I mean, probably none of us are really. Let's be honest, we're all fucking nerds. We make video games for a bloody living. I don't do talking on stage in front of 1,000 people. Um, that day was sort of like the big sort of like point where it's sort of like the response on that day was so phenomenal. And there's so many people saying all these amazing things. Sort of like, wow, that was amazing. I'm so excited for this. It's like, fuck, got to actually make it now and like
Yep.
have to make it good. Like it has to be good. And some things just have not changed at all. The stuff we were talking about earlier, sort of like that feeling I had about Desert Treasure 2. Like I remember, like mere like last week's development on Dragon Slayer 2. We're sat there like, holy, this quest is shit. We've made a terrible quest. What are we doing? We don't know what we're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, why am I doing this? I don't know. I'm not an experienced game designer or writer. A few months ago I was in QA, and a few months before that I was at university. Like, this is terrible. We've made something absolutely terrible. Everyone's going to hate it. Oh god, it's awful. And then it launched and everyone loved it mostly. We had a fun few like first days of everyone ripping Vorkast drop table to shreds, but on the whole, everyone absolutely loved it. And then yeah, from there it's sort of like, well, that's Ed making quests from here on out.
Wow. And that's like exactly what you wanted too, because deep down, questing's your thing.
Yeah, I think like to be honest, like it was I enjoyed working on Old School. Like, by the time Dragon Slayer 2 came out, I've been working on it for nearly a year full time. Like, then with the internship as well. I enjoyed it. Like, it was fun. Even doing the QA stuff was quite fun. But it's sort of one of those things where that kind of fun wouldn't have lasted forever, and indeed, especially on the QA salary, living in that box wouldn't have lasted forever. Like, realistically, like I sort obviously it's hard to say for sure, but would I have stayed at Jagex had I not sort of had that sort of like opportunity? I don't know, maybe not. But like that opportunity to tell stories and make quests that Dragon Slayer 2 sort of really kicked off. And yeah, the really nice thing is that also I think it proved something internally as well, like that I'd been fighting for, and that was that the thing I was saying earlier, like if we're doing old school RuneScape and we're doing old school RuneScape right, quests need to be one of the things at the absolute core of it, because quests are a huge part of people's nostalgia for this game. And it was Dragon Slayer 2 that I think started to show that to people internally as well. Like quests started to properly appear on our roadmap after that, I think, because of that. Because like yeah, maybe Monkey Madness 2 was a fluke. Like, it was the first one I've ever done. Obviously, we were going to get hyped, but Dragon Slayer 2 was even more successful than Monkey Madness 2 was. Like, it showed people that it was really like there was something there, that people maybe actually do like quests and stories, and yeah, I think it definitely played a big role in sort of starting a change in attitude at Jagex to whether this is something that should be happening and they should be doing.
It's cool because like you guys have just absolutely captured what the Gowers did with questing back in the day, and you've just like revamped it in such a good way. Like questing still feels nostalgia, even though Desert Treasure 2 literally came out last week. It already feels like, oh, that's always been a part of the lore. You know what I mean? Like that's amazing to have accomplished something like that. So
Yeah, that's always it's always been that sort of like balance of these quests. They need to feel like you're experiencing those original quests once more. Like, and some of them, like, there's a terrible lack of originality with so much actually what we do with quests. Like, it's core of it. What's Desert Treasure 2 about? Oh, the archaeologist has found another strange thing in the desert with some treasure in. It's locked. You need to go collect 4 items themed around the 4 Zerusian elements from 4 different bosses across the world and come and open it. And inside, it's not the treasure you think it is, it's something else. And yeah, it's terribly unoriginal, but like, just stuff like that. It's like capturing that nostalgia and then basically
yeah,
sort of like dialing up to 11 is kind of what we've always been trying to go for.
it works. It works with our community too, especially because like most players have been playing for, I want to say, 20 years, but at least 5+ years. And people kind of start just clinging on to the nostalgia of this game. So I think you guys do it brilliantly. I have a question here on Twitter from Furrywall. He asks, what quest lore would you have taken a different direction had you started it back in the beginning?
That's so it's maybe kind of like I don't know, maybe have like a cheat answer, maybe not quite. But I don't know, like when I think if you sort of like ask players, oh, who does what stories and stuff like that. What stories are people known for? And like I think the one people probably say I'm known for a lot is the Karen stuff because I've done pretty much all of it. But that said, even while I've done most of it, and most of it's sort of like being my most sort of like original works, the opportunity to do something that's not happened in RuneScape, a lot of it is actually only the way it is because of the stuff that I was given at the start. But like, there's obviously when Karen launched, one of the huge criticisms was there's no story here, there's no quests. Like this is not what RuneScape is. But there was still a little bit. There was still some very sort of like basic background elements that had already been written. So like, um, I actually probably wouldn't have done what we've done with Karen had I been there from the very start. I don't actually know. I don't know what I would have done with it, but I probably wouldn't have actually done it that way. I think a lot of what we've done with the Karen storyline has been sort of based on that in what we were given initially, and I think it's fair to say that what we were given initially, there was some stuff to like there. I do think some people are maybe a bit too harsh on the original Karen launch, and I think this might have been one of the situations where I sort of like taking the player hat off and putting the developer hat on, and sort of like having a bit more having understanding like the achievement that was there, in that I think they only had like 6 weeks to develop that entire continent. Like
Jesus.
they were screwed over hard. Like they were not given the time needed to do a good job. So the fact that there was still some things there that were good, that some of those activities were interesting and different and stuff like that,
Yeah.
there's still some stuff to be commended there. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that there was a lot that wasn't great. Like for having these 5 houses that kind of agree with each other and kind of don't, and like I get what they were going for. Sort of like Game of Thrones was like all the rage back then. It was all like
Yeah.
that was like peak Game of Thrones hype around sort of like late 2015, early 2016. Like I get exactly what they were going for, but it didn't really land. And then like you can obviously redevelop the landmass. We can like redevelop the activities. We can fix up the favor system, but lore is something that's a bit hard to fix up. People don't like you retconning things. It doesn't feel right. It feels off. So
Yeah.
like we kind of stuck with that like kind of budget Game of Thrones that was going on there, and like use that as the base for a storyline. To be honest, like I don't know if I would have actually used that and done that had I been making it from the beginning. So yeah, like probably yeah, I don't know, maybe an interesting answer one people wouldn't expect given how associated I am with the Karen story, but like I might not have actually told it that way.
Yeah.
Um, I still love it. Like I still love what we've done there, and like A King Divided. Like again, I struggle to when it comes to my own work, and I'm probably way too critical of it. But A King Divided, like, even while there's still quite a few bits of that quest, I look back and I'm like, don't like that. Wish I hadn't done that. On like, it's one of the ones that I'm more lean towards being positive on. Like, if nothing else, like it was an opportunity to do something that was primarily like my own work rather than continuing a storyline that someone else was telling, and that was like really fun to do and something that yeah, I'd love to do more of them. There's unfortunately like so few opportunities to do that with a game like RuneScape because it's so much of it's building on what's already there, as it should be. I'm not going to complain too much because like as we were just saying about like the whole nostalgia aspect, that's exactly how it should be. We should be building on what's there. We shouldn't be taking it in weird and radical directions because then it stops being old school. But for Kryn storyline, it's something like a really fun opportunity to sort of like scratch that itch a bit of doing something more original. But yeah, like maybe had I worked on it from the very beginning, I might. Who knows? I might have taken it in a very different direction.
Yeah, you kind of just got to build off the foundation. I do have to say though, like Zeah, yeah, was kind of a train wreck on release, but I mean, for its time, it wasn't. Yeah, I think we have to kind of like look at it in a different perspective. I mean, just knowing the resources you guys had, like just the minimal resources. I will say though, it is really coming together. Like it's looking beautiful, except obviously Lova King, Arceus, and Piscalarius, or whatever it is. Those three places are still atrocious. Like I'm like, very excited for those to like get fixed up. Arceus, dude, I whenever I teleport into Arceus, I'm just like, this is so depressing. Like everything, it depresses me. So as soon as they get their reworks, 'cause, I mean, to be honest, Shazian used to depress me. Now it's absolutely gorgeous. So
Shazian was great. Shazian was the one I think we used a fair bit when we were sort of like internally like showing that we need to do something here. I think one of the comparisons we made was that pre-rework there was a tent in Shazian where the tent was the size of Rimington, and in that tent there was a table in the middle of that tent, and the table inside the tent was bigger than one of the houses in Rimington. And that was one of the things we sort of like said, like, look, we ballsed up a bit here. We kind of need to make some tweaks to this one. It's one of those really interesting things when we talk about Krenvo. It's sort of like, as you say, it's like it was sort of in that era where things are a little bit different. It was very much on the borderline as well. It comes from that sort of same era where we were sort of like doing sort of thinking about quests a bit more. Like Monkey Madness 2 came out not long afterwards, and then it was sort of by that time next year we were already starting to talk about Dragon Slayer 2. Like it was very much an era of change in Old School. Old School had like a good couple of years at the start of being the weirdos in the corner that nobody talks to because they make the weird old version of the game. They just do what they can initially, not even having an artist at the start, just like throwing shit together, like that sort of thing. And it's stuff like the Kren launch, but yes, a lot of it didn't go great. But had that not happened, would we be where we are now? Sort of thing. It's one of those sort of weird and interesting questions of like, it showed that there was ambition, but not the budget to back it up, and that there was potential that wasn't getting properly realized. And the reworks, I guess, only reinforced that. There was actually so much love about Karen, but there just wasn't the time or money to like make it what it should have been. And that as soon as we started putting that time in, started making unique quests, doing the reworks and stuff like that, making the tents not a stupid size, that it all started to come together of wow, this actually has real potential. So like, it's one of those weird things. It's sort of like, in some ways, sort of like, should the Karen launch have happened the way it did? Probably not. But at the same time, it kind of needed to happen to set up the you learn from your mistakes. Like Old School learned from its mistakes, and we did things differently. Like I hear people make that argument about EOC sometimes, and that's a very dangerous argument to be making. But I at the same time I do sort of kind of get it. Had EOC not happened, like EOC was the catalyst that Old School was born from, and had it not happened, would the game have just sort of slowly trailed off? Did it need that big sudden event to actually spur the creation of Old School that maybe wouldn't have happened otherwise had it been a more slower decline? Like,
true.
Who could say for sure? But like, I hear people saying those things sometimes. Like, that's a dangerous statement to be making. That EOC EOC was actually good for the future of RuneScape, but at the same time, I do get where people are coming from when they say that sort of thing, and in many ways, I think Korend was maybe something similar, that it not going so well is what started to move things in a different direction for Old School and gave us the Old School we have now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, I think you're right. The ambition you guys had, I mean, the team had back then as well, just to push something out, even though you didn't have the budget. Because I think, yeah, like you said, the allocation of funds and all this extra resources you guys have now is probably simply because of that, those ambitious projects you guys were taking on earlier. I have a question about okay, so this is the question. What is the most underrated storyline in Old School? Though the storyline that doesn't get enough appreciation.
Storyline doesn't get enough appreciation. I feel like the cave goblins maybe don't get quite the love they deserve. And I think a lot of people obviously talk about like, oh yeah, the Marjat are great. We love Marjat. Do more Marjat quests, and yeah, Dragon Kid and Dragons, all good stuff. But like, personally, I've always had a real like fondness for the cave goblin storyline. And it never like whenever we do like surveys and stuff, it never really comes up too high. It's not too low either. It just sort of sits in the middle, like it's sort of very 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 average scores, which sort of implies that people just like have no real feelings on it whatsoever. And sort of like I feel that people maybe not giving that one the attention it deserves. I'm quite keen for that one to be one that we like try and conclude sooner rather than later. There's one of those interesting ones though where it's pretty much the only quest line in game that had the same person working on it from start to finish. Mod John A, I think was his mod name. It was a guy that he made all the quests, including the finale, Chosen Commander, which is one we don't have in Old School. And I think that alone is sort of probably why I look at it quite highly. That one creator was able to take his work through from beginning to end, and you can like, for better or for worse, you can see that it is a story that has not had any weird bumps or dips in quality sort of thing because of that. So if we did conclude it, I don't know. I might not actually want to change anything. I might just want to do Chosen Commander as it was done in RuneScape. But yeah, like I think it's definitely one that people maybe need to have a bit more love for.
Is that something you would like to do? Like just have your like is there an idea you have that you really want to come into Old School, like something you've been thinking of? Like an entirely new storyline?
Yeah, so like kind of, I guess to sort of like mention this a bit, when I was mentioning like King Divided, like don't get me wrong, like I like getting to make quests, and hopefully sometimes I think maybe from the feedback we get, but sometimes I make some half decent ones. But there is always sort of that feeling that sort of like a lot of my job is taking someone else's work and continuing where they left off. Which again, as it absolutely should be. As I said before, like it's all about a lot of it's about nostalgia. Nostalgia is a good thing. It's what Old School is built on. It's like we just, I wouldn't want to take someone else's work and not show it the respect that it deserves. Like I've from two aspects, sort of like I think if someone did that to my work, how would I feel? Feel pretty shit about it. But also like from it's what how the game should be, because like again that nostalgia side of things, like we shouldn't be taking these stories and overly changing them. So it's always that delicate balance of like being respectful of what the original quests were, and then also trying to add that old school twist onto them so they feel unique. But yeah, it does sort of the end result of that does sort of mean that like a lot of what I'm doing is sort of a lot of it's someone else's stuff that I've taken over, and that was one of the really nice things about King Divide. It really felt like it was something that was more my own work that someone else hadn't. I wasn't continuing on from someone else, and yeah, I'd love to do a few more things like that. It's just finding the right opportunities. With so many storylines already in game, I'm always very cautious about starting new ones. We've only started one new storyline since Old School begun with the Kren storyline, and it felt like that one made complete and utter perfect sense because we had a whole new landmass. It needs a storyline to go with it. It wouldn't make sense for it to be too heavily tied to any other storyline. Obviously, we've tried to add some links here and there, like with Desert Treasure 2 just recently. But on the whole, it needs its own storyline. But like, there's not many other opportunities to do something like that. I wouldn't want to just add on for the sake of it, because it kind of feel like a slap in the face, I think, to a lot of people that we've got something like God knows how many, like nearly 20 probably different storylines that are not finished and they've been going on for bloody since forever. And like to then just release a brand new storyline rather than continuing on of those would be probably a bit insulting to a lot of people. So it's not something we've done too much of, but I'm quite looking forward to the next opportunity, whatever that may be. Probably with another new landmass, I'd imagine, to hopefully have a chance of telling another new story that yeah, I can sort of get. And ideally, yeah, take it through from beginning to end. And that's sort of the other thing as well. It's sort of like there's always that sort of like, oh, well, how long will these storylines last? Even with the Karen storyline, where I've done all the quests so far, there's still a few more quests in it. Like what if someone else ends up continuing those quests? How would I feel about that? Will I get to take
True.
it through to the end? So, yeah, like I'm very keen, and hopefully there's a good opportunity at some point soon to be able to take something from start to finish. It's one thing I've not really been able to properly do so far.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to have like a Game of Thrones happen where like the last few seasons are like, what just happened?
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and that would make sense because like again with the whole budget Thrones thing coming out with Kingdom of Crown, you leaving and somebody else just butchering it. Mandrew asked if you could remove one quest from OSRS entirely, which would you choose?
I feel like saying rat catchers is like a cheat answer because everyone says rat catchers. Don't get me wrong, like rat catchers is shit. Like let's not beat around the bush here. It's a terrible quest, but like it's also one that isn't like completely like lost cause, I guess. Like the reason rat catchers is terrible is, I mean, a large part of it is primarily because it's that bloody stealth section. And also it's got absolutely terrible dialogue. Like you could fix that quite easily, and we probably really should, to be honest. We really probably should actually just fix it up. Like give it a good dialogue pass and like tweak that stealth section to actually not be broken, and the end result would probably be not too bad. So I don't know. Like, is there another quest out there that's really like has no redeeming qualities? I don't know really. 'Cause so like there's a fair few quests in game which obviously aren't brilliant. But just like I was just saying about Ratcatcher, even not great ones, there's probably still something in them that's like the thing that's maybe making them not great could maybe be fixed, and the quest could like still remain. Like, so I don't know. Is there any that I'd take out altogether? I think there's probably a lot that I would tweak, a lot of where I'd consider making some changes to them. But is there anywhere where I think we should get rid of them altogether? There's no hope for this quest. I don't know.
Hmm. Okay. So this is a question I'm just curious. I'm gonna ask you: which fiction writers have inspired you the most? And like, yeah, with your own, I guess, narrative development.
I think it really depends, to be honest. One of the quite nice things about RuneScape is that there's not like one singular storyline going through all of it. There's lots of different like quest series, and like all of them clearly have very different like influences and stuff like that. It's like as mentioned, like with Korend, they were clearly going for a Game of Thrones kind of thing. So I attempted, and hopefully maybe successfully, if people seem to like it. So I'll take it. Tried to do a better take of Game of Thrones, obviously for that one. Like obviously like looking at like George R. R. Martin's work and like sort of like seeing sort of like what the way he did things and stuff like that, and trying to look beyond. Because I think the thing about especially back then when it was sort of like the Game of Thrones craze. It's sort of like there's a lot of very sort of like surface details that it's very easy to say, oh, well, Game of Thrones is just a show where no one is safe and everyone has a chance of dying, and that's obviously something that the one of the reasons why the series sort of nosedived towards the end, in that that's what it purely became a lot of it became about shock value for the sake of shock value. But there's a little bit more nuance to it than that, and so that was sort of like what I try to look at when doing like Kingdom Divided. Obviously, when doing sort of like the more like a series that really get into like the proper fantasy like elves and stuff like that. You can never go wrong with the works of Tolkien. Like he there's so much that's all based on his work, so it makes absolute sense. To be honest, for a lot of things, I don't actually. I look more to other video games than like films or books or TV shows for a lot of stuff. Like ultimately, I think we're making a video game. Our first inspiration should probably be other video games. Video games tell stories differently to other medium quite often. So I often like look at how other video games do things, and sometimes shamelessly borrow some of their ideas, both for story and for like gameplay as well. Like a lot of the sort of like games and franchises that were big back when RuneScape was sort of like first coming about. A lot of stuff that the Gowers potentially took reference from, like obviously they took a lot of reference from D&D as well. Yeah, like stealing from quite a few old like RPGs. Knights of the Old Republic is always a big one for me that I like to reference. Resident Evil games as well. Obviously, they're a completely different genre, but there's so much that actually sort of transfers over, like especially from the earlier games, like so much of them are sort of built on those same foundations of like that same era of gaming, and stuff like that. One of the big ones right now, and is the Souls games. We
Yes.
see whenever we do surveys, we see quite a reasonable overlap between RuneScape players and people who like the Souls games, and it makes sense. They they like games that a lot of the times can be very confusing and really punish you and make you question why you're playing this game. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, there's a fair amount of overlap there, and like started to maybe steal sort of a bit of what they do, and plus it comes full circle because what's his name? Miyazaki, the creator of the Souls games, he's always said that his biggest inspiration is D&D, just like RuneScape's is. So it kind of comes full circle. He steals from D&D, we steal from D&D, we steal from him. Everyone steals from everyone.
No, not steal. Inspired. Remember?
That's inspire. Yep, sorry, no stealing here. No stealing. We all inspire each other.
I will say the 4 bosses from Desert Treasure 2 really feel like Elden Ring style. In fact, just going to Vardorvis, like just going there, attacking, and immediately the arena closes up, and you're just in this fight to the death, basically. Really feels like Elden Ring. Feels like that. What's that? Like one of the earlier bosses you kill in Elden Ring, that lion guy. That's what it felt like. That like. I can't even remember his name. It's been too long since I played it, but yeah, just like that, where you're like walking through the water. I don't know if you've played it, but like walking through the water and you enter, and then there's this like lion dude with the swords. That's literally what Vardorvis feels like for me. So it's cool.
Yeah, but like, well, I think one of the things those games always absolutely nail is the sort of like the spectacle side of the bosses. Like, there's that feeling in like when you're playing one of those games where you walk through this archway or something into this big open space, and straight away you go, oh fuck, this is a boss arena.
Yep.
There's only one reason why this area would look like this big and empty. This is a boss arena. What's gonna happen? Something's gonna spawn as I walk further in. Like, yeah, I think it's fair to say we definitely sort of like took inspiration from that. Like, with all of them, to be honest. One of the things we did like for DT2, but we never really done before, was had those like little mini cutscenes that introduce each boss. Yeah, I really want to sort of like really heighten sort of like the spectacle side of it, and like make each boss feel like something. It's like that first time entering make you feel like a bit special, like that feeling of apprehension, like, oh, here we go, here's the boss fight.
It's really cool, and I love the new mechanics you guys are trying out. Like the fights just feel really cool. I was just wondering, like, I know you're more of the lore guy, but I think of these fights, and then I do think of Elden Ring at the same time, and I'm like, man, it would be so cool. Obviously, it would be hard to kind of nail, but I bet there would be a way for you guys to develop a fight where parrying is like really paramount, where somehow you can make it so like the tick timing on your weapon can sort of be canceled out, and you can click right as the enemy's about to attack or something and like nullify their damage or whatever. Like I feel like there's just so much potential, and you guys are seeing it and you guys are introducing it very carefully. And I think it's like really good that you guys are doing that way. But I get excited about future bosses, especially with just how successful these latest 4 have been.
I think with DT2, probably one of the big ones, like the big step for us was with Vardovis with the I guess the quick time event is probably the best way to describe it, with the sort of like things appearing on screen you got to click on.
Mm-hmm.
That's really probably the first time like, that we've taken we've come at a boss from that direction. Like we don't really do much sort of like stuff that's sort of like I guess 2D interface driven in our boss fights. Probably partially because we're terrified of third party clients just trivializing it maybe.
That's true.
But like I guess sort of it's always felt like very alien to us. Like things happen in the 3D space, in the 3D game world. Like we can't be having a boss fight that sort of starts becoming like more like on the like a 2D interface sort of thing, and we were really unsure of that one, to be honest. Like it was one of the first things we developed for DT2 actually was that quick time event. Like back before we even properly started developing anything, we were just doing some prototyping with different ideas for bosses, and that was one of the first ones we did. And we were like, this probably won't work. Let's give it a go. We're in the prototyping stage, and like it ended up like when we had playtests and stuff, it ended up being one of their favorite things. We were like, we're not sure on this one. We're probably going to take it out. What do you think? We're like, no, don't take it out. Leave it in. This is like the best bit of a fight. I feel like that sort of that potentially now opens a gate for lots more interesting things. So like if we can start utilizing stuff like that a bit more, we could potentially come up with all sorts of weird and wonderful ideas.
I'm a little nervous of you guys taking it too far, and then all of a sudden, like you have to type out a phrase or something mid-fight. How good are your keyboard typing skills? Like, or
Yeah,
even
definitely
like a simple letter. Just panicking, like looking at your keyboard trying to find the letter.
I did. Obviously, so many memes about that bit of sort of like, oh wow, awaken Vardovis fights becomes a full catcher sort of thing. It's like they were, some of those were fucking great. Like, yeah, definitely one we don't want to overuse and push too far with. But
no, I think you guys have done it good with the point and click. I think that's the way you should do it. I mean, there's also a lot of potential for just having to have your prayer book open and then your prayers start flashing, and you have to click the ones that are flashing, just something like that, and then you have to go back to your normal prayers again. But yeah, you guys just, I think, are really starting to, not starting to, you guys have already been on it, but like just boss fights in general feel really good, and you guys don't, I don't know. I feel like you guys give the players enough freedom for the fights to feel good. Even if you want it to go a certain way, you at least allow the players the freedom to be like, hey, like you can kind of, cheese this mechanic, but it actually makes it fun in a simple way. So yeah, you guys are doing great.
there's so many mechanics where we just. So many times we actually have no idea how people are going to interact with it, and so many things like this one's obviously a few years ago now, but everyone knows what Wook's walking is.
Yep.
Everyone knows it. It's something you can now do. There's multiple bosses in game where you can utilize a Wook's walk, but it all really properly started with Vorkath, and we didn't design Vorkath under that expectation. Quite the opposite, and we did something back then that in hindsight was actually a really poor move on our part, and something that I think we do a lot better at now, is that when we saw him doing it, we were horrified. We were like terrified, like, no, this is wrong. This is not how we intended you to do this. Like, you're not meant to be still like fighting the boss while he's firing his projectiles. Like, you're meant to be dodging the projectiles. And because he was still fighting it, the fight length was far shorter than what we'd originally intended. And I'll be honest with you, we panicked. We're like, shit, this isn't what was meant to happen. This is all wrong. Quick, we need to nerf it. We need to stop him from doing that. And I think it shows how our attitudes have changed over time as well. It's sort of like, that was the wrong way to look at that. Instead, what we should look at was like, wow, brilliant. He's only gone and done it again, hasn't he? Like he's found a unique and interesting way to tackle this that introduces like for people who want to do it, like an extra element of skill of like that timing of doing that, and for people who don't care can do it the way we intended, and Our panic and our rush to try and fix it was very much in poor taste, to be honest. Like I think now we do a lot better of like let's just see what people do. People find all sorts of weird and wonderful strategies, and like if those strategies end up like changing that our balancing and stuff like that, it means they're getting the kills much faster than we expected. Don't nerf a boss. Just like we'll tweak the drop table or something like that, or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
else. Let's not take those cool mechanics and get rid of them. I think we've embraced that stuff a lot more now, and it's always really nice, and it gives us ideas as well. When somebody comes up with some cool way of potentially like taking on a mechanic in a different way, and in some cases you've got the skill, maybe even trivializing it, it then makes us go, all right, how can we use that in a different way for the next boss we develop?
Yep. It's really cool. And I'm glad you guys were really careful with TOA, especially when like the Akka movement started coming out and then the Baba Red X. You guys like I feel like you guys handled it really nicely where you're still cautious of things being broken, but you're not doing anything too hastily. Yeah. It's exciting. It's exciting to see what's going to come next. There was actually something brought up in the Q&A by Mod Arcane. He was talking about, well, and he had mentioned Husky in this as well, as like Husky was saying that there's just something that doesn't feel good about eating food in a boss. And we still need to keep that aspect of eating food, but just the fundamentals of losing time eating makes it feel bad no matter what the case is. So Arcane's suggestion was, just add pauses, sort of like natural pauses in the boss fights where you can eat a food freely and not feel like you're wasting time. Do you have any like follow up on that, like of what you would, I don't know, any like suggestions on just that aspect of PVM, I guess?
I think just in general, like in the past, we've sometimes made the mistake of thinking that for a fight to be difficult, it needs to be like completely full on. It can only ramp up, and the time. I think one thing I really liked about one of the things we didn't tell, and I can't take any credit for this, like fully Arcane who designed the final boss. I really liked in the final boss the stagger thing he did. Like we've never really done anything like that in RuneScape before on the whole. Like but it's something that you see in so many other games. Like, it makes perfect sense. Like, if you do something right, like you'll stagger the boss and you'll get a moment to do something, and what you do with that moment is up to you. You can use that to then go all in, and like really start dishing out some heavy damage to the boss. So you can take a step back and use it to like recover. And like going back to Souls again, you see it in those games constantly. Like you stagger the boss, that can be a golden opportunity for you to heal up, boost yourself in some way, or it can be an opportunity to really go in and try and deal as much damage as possible. Um, I want to see us do more things like that. I really think that's it's quite interesting, quite fun doing stuff like that. Interestingly, I think it's something that would work particularly well for quest bosses. For quest bosses, you have that opportunity to make the boss fight feel a bit more fluffy and narrative, like I guess, and like there's fun opportunities to like do more things of sort of like that kind of stuff that maybe we haven't dipped into enough yet. That I'd like to see us do more of.
Yeah, I think Sodaseg did it well as well. It's just that idea just came to my mind of like the maze that appears twice throughout the fight. That is your sort of break, but you're still on the clock. Like you still got to get through it, and it's not. It's more of like, yeah, just breaking up the action a little bit, but you still have the action. I don't know. I'm excited for like future bosses. Do you guys have any? Well, let me just ask you this: when do you guys plan to release another raid? Do you guys talk about that ever?
We do. Like I think there's nothing that has been really properly like set in stone yet. I think the general consensus sort of is so far. I think it's probably about spot on. Is that the gap between Chambers of Xeric and Theatre of Blood was probably too short. Like those came out in pretty quick succession, one year after the other. But then on the flip side, the gap between Theatre of Blood and Tools of Mascot was way too long. Like there was such a huge gap without a raid. So I think the hope is that we can be a bit more consistent with raids and probably not be delivering one a year, maybe one every 2 to 3 years, maybe. I don't know. Like, but there's been some conversations about what we could do. Like personally, I'm quite keen. After Tombs of Mascot was, I guess, sort of like the it's kind of like the gateway. Is the right way of describing it. Like it's there's still plenty of challenges there, especially once you start upping your invocation and stuff like that. But going into Tombs of Mascot, we very much knew that we weren't going to try and do what Theatre of Blood did, where it's going to take like a full like day and a half for someone to even get first completion and like that sort of thing. That we wanted to make a raid that was a bit more accessible is probably the best word. Easy is the wrong word to use. I see people use easy a lot around Tombs of Mascot, saying, "Oh, it's the easy raid." Like it kind of, but wasn't probably like really capture it. It's the accessible raid. It's like
Hmm.
it's the one that's meant to act as the gateway to sort of like if you've never done a raid before, do Tombs of Mascot first. The invocations provide you a really good way of sort of like slowly upping the difficulty to get yourself in a place where you have maybe a bit more of a chance at the other ones. Now that we've done that, I really want to see us do a really challenging one for the next one. Like, I'm really hoping that whatever we do for raids for it, we recreate that sort of like Theatre of Blood experience, or indeed Inferno, where it takes like a couple of days for first completion. It's been so long since we've seen something like that.
Hmm.
We ever so slightly scratch that itch every now and then, like a little bit with stuff like I guess the Awakened bosses did a little bit, but still just not quite the same thing. I'm quite keen to see us do that.
It's just so tough because one of the things that was mentioned is like the reason those pieces of content are so difficult is because there's just such a like it takes time to get to the final part and you're just working your way up where like if you just release a single boss that's a few minutes long, it's just instant. And like that's why the Inferno and Theater Blood just took so long, is you're just having to constantly reset back to square one again and build your way back up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's why a raid seems like it's a really good opportunity, I think, for us to really push the boat out. I mean,
That's true.
obviously, this is just my personal opinions. I have no idea what we'll do with the next raid. Like I say, we're not at that point of sort of like planning that yet. But yeah, when we do, I'm hoping we do a Theatre of Bloods kind of thing for it and try and make something that it really does become about that journey to the final boss. And yeah, if you fail, you've got to go right all the way right back to the start and like who will be the first to get it, that sort of thing.
Yeah. One of the things, and you mentioned this in the Q&A, like it was brought up about the difficulty of the bosses during Desert Treasure 2. This is definitely the hardest the encounters have been during any quest. And it's like you're just thrown into the fight, and a lot of the time people are dying. Like I think I died two or three times during the quest because I just had no idea what I was doing. And the last bit, like that, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine going like doing a blind playthrough on those final four like Barrows brothers guys, like at the very end of the quest. Like doing a blind playthrough through that would be very tough because I had no idea what I was doing the first guy. So what are your like thoughts on people questioning that? Do you like where they sit?
I think uh, I think they're about where we want them to be, and it's kind of similar to what we were just sort of saying about Tombs of Mascot, where I think it's really important that we have content in game that is content that acts as like a bridge or a gateway or whatever you want to call it. Like for a long time in old school, there's sort of been this problem where we've had, I guess, what you'd call like the end game piece of content, like Inferno, for a lesser extent, Theatre of Blood, more so at launch, obviously less so now. Like these very aspirational like piece of content, like super end game stuff. But the journey to them being like really unclear. Like there's this huge gap between sort of like stuff like you're getting your fire cape at Jad, and then you sort of like you kind of sort of it's kind of implied after you've got your fire cape. Okay, well now the Inferno is the next thing you got to do because it's literally just round the corner. You got to use that fire cape. You just got to sacrifice it. Then you can hop into the Inferno. It implies that's the next step, and obviously it's not in the bloody slightest. You know, the gap between them is absolutely immense, and I think something the game lacked for quite a long time is stuff that bridges that gap a bit, and that's all what we've been trying to focus on a lot over the past few years. Things like adding the entry mode to Theatre of Blood, doing the invocations of Tombs of the Mascot, stuff like that. Like starting to like create that a better journey
Mm-hmm.
from I guess what would the definitions about like players and levels are always really a nightmare in our game because we've heard something as mid-level and then suddenly we've got an angry mob at the gates like that's not mid-level, that's high level, or vice versa sort of thing.
Hmm.
But um kind of a definitions are kind of, I guess, irrelevant up to a certain point. The point is that there's these big gaps and that it makes it very hard for people to learn the end game, and as a result people never get there, which as a result means we don't do any end game content because nobody's getting to the end game and it's hard to justify it. So like, I think it's really important. I think it's really good for the past few years we've been focusing on quite, in some cases, quite aggressively, like bridging those gaps. And DT2, I think, is sort of like the next step of that, and a really important part of that. That quests offer us a really good opportunity to bridge those gaps and introduce concepts that, if you want to start engaging with higher end game PVM, you're going to need to become quite familiar with. And if you don't want to engage them, it's just a one-time quest boss. So it's not like something you need to do over and over again, sort of thing.
Yeah,
Like they
yeah.
offer that really good opportunity, and that's something we're really keen to do for Desert Treasure too. Like on paper, like the numbers, like the actual stats of these bosses, they're all actually lower than other Grandmaster Quest bosses. Like these bosses have lower stats than Galvek or the Fragment of Seren. Like they're from that side, they're actually technically easier. They're all about the mechanics, these ones, and that's what makes them difficult. But that also is what makes them in themselves also accessible. Like you don't come to this boss and like obviously gear always matters. If you come to the boss with a twisted bow compared to a rune crossbow, you're going to have a better time. But bosses that have been bounced around, you can actually kill these bosses in pretty relatively budget gear. So much for focus actually on your own personal ability and your own like self improvement. Like because of that, they feel like they do feel like accessible to a certain extent. Like oh, I've got to this boss, I can't kill it. I've got to go away and like earn shit tons of money to buy this next item, sort of thing. No, 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 no. You died of a boss because you didn't dodge that attack and it smacked you in the face, sort of thing. Like there's learning opportunities there. And I think that's something really important for us to do. I know not everyone agrees. I know some people don't like that, but they don't think that things like the Questscape should be building in difficulty. But ultimately, like if they don't, like what is the goal? Like why like different people obviously play the game for different reasons. Some people just want to play the game to just chill and relax and just mine all day, but other people want to go for the end game stuff. And like the problem is like if you just keep everything the same difficulty and don't have that progression, don't keep bumping things up, that like yeah, you can sit there and mine all day up to a certain point, but there needs to be something else at some point. You're going to get bored and you're going to want to do something else. If we don't keep pushing things up and like pushing the boundaries, you're going to run out of things to aim for. And that's sort of what it's kind of like. That's what our focus sort of is with stuff like this, is just gently pushing those boundaries up. Like here's a slightly harder boss, and this one it'll teach you a few things about end-game PVM. And like if you learn those things, who knows? Maybe you might find you enjoy it. Maybe you want to do end-game PVM sort of thing. That's sort of like the sort of like attitude we've been sort of like taking to it.
I think it's definitely the way to go. I'm very pleased with it, and like you said, you can't please everybody. This is a concern I've had for a while now, is like kind of bridging skilling into that more difficult avenue. Not difficult, but like just challenging. Just that idea of like pushing skilling that same direction, because what it feels like is, at least in my opinion, when a skilling update comes out, it feels like it's made for a toddler. But then any PVM that comes out, it's like you're really trying to push that envelope. And it feels like we have this vision as the community and as like the team at Jagex that like skilling needs to be super, super easy and for everybody day one. Now, obviously, Hallowed Sepulchre is an amazing update that like really pushed those limits. And I wonder, like, do you guys as a team, like, are you guys thinking and planning for any like difficult skilling content in the future that kind of almost correlates with how PVM goes?
I think it's something we definitely like want to do. I mean, it's something I know I personally have wanted to see for quite some time. That like take skilling bosses for example. Like the first skilling boss, Wintertodt. we've obviously talked about that one already. Like that sort of set a certain standard
Yeah.
there that has been followed to a certain extent with other, not just skilling boss, but other skilling activities as well. Like obviously there's a fair few parallels with like Temporos and even like non-skilling bosses like skilling mini games like Gains's Rift. You still see a few parallels there, and like, but there's no reason why it has to be that way. Like, so we take Zalcano as an alternate example. Obviously, Zalcano is still pretty damn easy in the grand scheme of things, but it the gameplay wise, you sort of see it plays more like a traditional boss.
Hmm.
So even though the difficulty is not very, it shows you that like mechanically that skilling activities can be used in a more traditional boss-like encounter. And I'd be quite keen to sort of see us sort of like push that a bit further. Like Sepulchre's obviously a really good example of something that did a really good job of that. One thing I think is an issue for us right now, and to be honest, a lot of this is about perception. There's no reason why we couldn't change this, but right now it's sort of like when a game has been around this long, certain sort of I guess informal rules get established, and that is that like bossing, like in game, it's not about gaining XP. Like you don't go to a boss to train up your combat skills, that sort of thing. You go to a boss to get loot. You go to a boss to make money, to get items, get uniques, that sort of thing. And with the skilling activities we've done, the vast majority of them, including the skilling bosses, they've been primarily focused on gaining XP. And straight away, as soon as you sort of like taking that attitude, like the way you have to approach the design is completely different. Because
Yep.
if unless you're an Iron Man, by the way, like if you are not capable of taking on this boss and getting this unique, you could probably go buy it instead. You can like do some different activity, earn enough money to go buy it. But if you can't, right now there's this sort of thing in game where like if you can't engage with like the skilling activity gives the most XP, there's no other way around that. And right now there's sort of like with the game having been that way for so long, to change that is something that would be bit controversial, I imagine. Like, so there's sort of like I guess two potential answers there. Like, do we start to pivot skilling activities, so like build more skilling activities that are less focused on XP gain and more focused on gaining items, or do we maybe rip the band-aid off and start saying that no, if you want to earn the highest XP rates, you need to get good, basically. There's a few interesting questions there that I think are maybe some of the reasons why we've been a bit more cautious of that sort of thing. Like, bosses already exist. People know what bosses are. We had a harder boss. Maybe less people can do this boss than before, but ultimately, like, they know the process. They know how this works. Big hard boss. Maybe I can't kill it. It drops some cool items, get money, but with skilling activities, you get a bit more extra complication there because the whole like should everyone have access to the same XP gains, that sort of thing, and all that fun stuff.
My thoughts on like that question is like, okay, so there are dedicated skillers that really don't care necessarily about just going hard in the game. They just want to gain their XP. And RuneScape is built upon like just putting in the hours, not trying to learn some crazy methods. So, and we saw it with Sepulchre, like just the amount of just a lot of controversy, to be honest, in the skilling atmosphere before and like right after it was released of like, okay, this is now the very best thing to do by a mile, and now we have to learn this crazy stuff. In my head, I'm just thinking like I don't even think these really challenging skilling methods should be anywhere close to the best skilling XP per hour. I think it should be almost like just a very rewarding thing. I think the team should focus those really challenging skilling methods on rewards only, and then just have it be like, I don't know, just around like half the maximum XP per hour you could even get. So then there's absolutely no, there's no argument going on about like the rates, like the skilling rates, because I feel like a lot of people just want to, I don't know, at least in my head, I would love it if there was like some Sepulchre 2.0 that was just like the XP rates irrelevant. Like it would just be a super challenging thing that you are getting skilling XP in, but it's mainly focused around rewards and just fun and like pushing the limits of your skill. And that's personally like the road I would like to see skilling go down. And then of course you're not having all the disagreements and the controversy within XP rates, but
Yeah,
it's a tough one for sure.
yeah, I'd love us to do more things like that. Like obviously agility was probably, I guess, probably one of the easier ones because it just makes sense straight away. So like dodging around things, dodging
Hmm.
obstacles, like it fits right away. Like what other skills could we do that with that don't just end up becoming another skilling boss? Thieving is one that sticks out to me. I think there's something really good we could do with thieving like that. Like imagine pyramid plunder, but actually like good and challenging and intense, like
Yeah,
of
yeah.
properly raiding a tomb and stealing things from it. I reckon there's some really good opportunities there. But yeah, I really hope we sort of like delve into them at some point.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more difficult with the traditional gathering skills. Like you think of something that would be, I don't know. I just think as developers and as a community, we need to kind of like look outside of the box. That's just my opinion, mainly because I think all skilling is pretty dull, and I feel like the community kind of thinks that. And the only way for it not to be dull is just arbitrarily boosting XP rates with every update, just to make it feel like you don't have to do it for as long, which is just the worst way to go about it, in my opinion. Anyway, yeah, just a little side thing. I have a question for you. I just want to kind of pick your brain. What are like your three favorite movies?
Oh, three favorite movies.
Yeah, like I
That's a,
guess I asked that some just kind of just wondering where you maybe get some inspiration as well. Like, do you have like do you have like favorite directors as well?
so favorite. It's one of those things where I think it probably changes a lot depending on like mood and stuff. So and I guess over time, like my opinion on films has changed a fair bit too. Like I found that just these days, like I've become very I don't know what the right word is. I don't know what's the opposite of snobbish? I don't even know what the right word is, but sort of like I've become very carefree with like films recently, in that I've
Hmm.
kind of and this is just probably like absolutely terrible thing for someone like me to say who's meant to like care about stories. So I kind of like lost interest a bit in like films as a method of like telling complex stories. I've found that these days like that games have come such a long way, and TV has actually come a fair way as well. That those are both feel like much better mediums now to tell complex stories. So I must admit, when it comes to films these days, I'm actually far more interested in just how much shit blows up on screen and stuff like that. I've become very crude, I guess. Like one of the films, like for recent years, I absolutely fucking loved it. I loved Top Gun Maverick. Like the story of that film makes no bloody sense whatsoever. Don't watch that film for the story whatsoever. But it was just really
Yeah,
fun. It was just really enjoyable film. If I find
entertaining.
myself, yeah, more and more just like for films like that sort of what I want to get out of them now. So like obviously not a completely shit story, like a story that like works, but that's just a bit more fun, like a bit more like less focus on something really complex. Like I found that more and more like TV and games just doing a much better job at that. And that said, completely contradicting that, there are some exceptions. I do still quite like a fair few of. I think we mentioned him earlier, like Christopher Nolan's films. I do quite like a lot of the stuff he does. Like there's always just something a bit different there with what he's doing. Inception is still probably my favorite of his. I do find some of his more recent ones are maybe starting to get a bit too convoluted. He might be showing off a bit too much.
Yeah.
Like take Tenet for example. Like I watched Tenet, and it was good. Don't get me wrong, it was good. And there's some really interesting concepts there, but I don't think it needs to be that confusing.
See,
Maybe I'm just not smart enough.
no, I think part of it is it's just to basically mind fuck you. But like
Yeah.
that's the idea of time travel I would like to see you do for a quest. Like something that's actually just like what is going on.
Yeah, the concept. I really like the concept of that film. Like,
Yeah.
it was a really good concept. I don't think the film did maybe necessarily a brilliant job of putting it into practice.
Hmm.
I think it had potential. It wasn't quite fulfilled. Like, which is like I say, I think why I prefer some of his earlier films, like Inception. I think was like the right balance, like an interesting concept, but didn't go too wild with it and too out there. Um, so I think what are the films? I mean, obviously, like I'm like every other bloody person that plays RuneScape. I'm a typical nerd, so all the old sort of like classics, like Star Wars films, and that sort of thing. Always love those. Hopefully nothing. I don't think there's anything too out of the ordinary there, really.
Okay. This is an odd question, but I want to ask it. Do you dream vividly? Like, does dreaming have anything to do with you designing narratives or stories?
Not really, to be honest. My dreams are full of complete and utter rubbish. A place, a lot of my narrative work comes in the shower. Shower's a really good place for me.
Okay.
Like I have very long showers, never intentionally. I'll get in the shower and like right, time for a quick shower. And fucking like half an hour later, sort of like, oh, I should probably get out now, but I've just started thinking about like stories and stuff like that. Yeah,
That's
like
cool.
so some things just come to me in all sorts of weird places, like not dreams, but sometimes just before going to bed. Like
Mm,
you spend a whole day trying to think of something, it's just not working. To us, not just on a narrative side, but also like I guess the actual like gameplay and implementation side as well, the actual like developer side. Like and the whole day is like something is just not working, something's not coming into your head, it just doesn't fit right. And then finally like get to the end of the day and going to bed and like lying down in bed, it's like, no wait, there's the answer. Better
that's
not forget
cool.
that.
Do you ever get writer's block or, story block?
Um, Kind of, like not fully, but there's definitely some things that come together much faster than others. Like obviously, like I said, Dragon Slayer 2 earlier, like wrote pretty much that entire thing in 2 days. And I think the more notable thing is that it was a solid like just 2 days over a weekend of writing this, and that the vast majority of the quest that launched is the same as what was in those documents. Is I guess the other thing as well. Like it didn't really change too much. Like there was a few changes here and there, some quite notable ones. The death of a certain cat included was not in the original document. But on the whole, it stayed pretty damn similar. Then there's others where like it takes a lot longer and like it's never full on writer's blocks. There's always ideas. There's always like things getting written, but like there's some where it's more like I'll come up with an idea, I'll write something down, and I'll come back to it and go, ah shit, let's do it again. Like Desert Treasure 2, we've been like we were properly planning Desert Treasure 2 for about 3 years before it launched, and it was one that evolved quite a bit over time. Like I say, planning it for 3 years, and there was ideas floating around even before that's like four years ago, maybe even getting close to 5 years ago now, potentially. There was some ideas floating around, but even like after like we started properly planning for it and even started putting hints in game, which we first started doing about 3 years ago, like it's one that evolved a huge amount. Like there was never like writer's block. Like I say, there was these ideas, and I was thinking about them more and like having different ones and changing things. There's also stuff like that. There's also like there's often like other influences that can like make you reconsider something. Like I'll have something like, oh, this is probably not too bad an idea, but then other things happen. I go back to it and go, actually, let's change that now. I think one of the big ones of Desert Treasure 2 is that our ambition for Old School changed over the course of like that 3 year period where we were sort of like thinking about Desert Treasure 2, and I think we gained a lot of confidence, partially because of the other quests we were releasing in that period as well. We gained a lot more confidence, I think, in being braver and being more daring and playing it less safe. And I think the original ideas for Desert Treasure 2 probably played it quite safe, and they were probably far more similar to some of the Marjrat stories told in RuneScape 3. And over time, they sort of like got replaced by more weird and wonderful and wackier ideas because we wanted to be a bit braver. We wanted sort of like we wanted to do things a bit differently and like sort of we said before, but like obviously nostalgia is super important. It was so important that Desert Treasure 2 immediately feel like a sequel to Desert Treasure. Like we got the four bosses, four things you got to gather. You've got a new version of the Stranger, but that's dialed up to 11. But that in itself just made it all the more important that if we've got all these elements that are the same, it's even more critical that we have things that are truly unique and different, and to take some risks, not just with the gameplay, but with the storytelling as well. So that sort of stuff also like, influenced it too. Like, oh, I've got this idea, but actually, let's be a bit braver. Let's rewrite it to do something a bit more radical.
I'm going to just change topics real quick and talk about sailing. If it passes, do you think you'll have, is it going to be, are quests going to start kind of tying into the sailing lore, or is that going to be sort of like a Zeah where it's its own storyline?
I think they should. I think one of the big problems with like when Zeah first launched was obviously it not having any quests, and we fixed that by adding quests. But those quests, even now, there's still a certain feeling of separation of like it doesn't sometimes in some places it doesn't fully feel part of a world, and that's why we've also sort of tried to fix it with other in other ways. It's sort of like Dragon Slayer 2 did a bit, and Desert Trader 2's done it as well. We're having a quest that is sort of like primary set on the mainland that visits Kourend a bit and sort of like ties things together. But even still, even now, there's still in a lot of places a feeling that it's a bit more disconnected. Um, if sailing passes, I think right from the very beginning, we need to make sure it's properly integrated, and like the team working on that, they've already been like in fact just this past week they've sort of like been looking at like integration in like the existing game and stuff and how it fits in and around existing quests and that sort of thing. Should these quests include sailing? And I think it's definitely sort of like the right way to go. I'm very keen on like if it does pass on seeing if there's interesting ways we can integrate it into like other stuff we're doing quest wise. Maybe some of them more obvious than others. Like there's a pirate quest series that sort of feels like an obvious one. If sailing passes, like
Yes,
we should
yes.
make if sailing passes, we should make sure that the pirate quest series is fully revolves around sailing, and that's a quest series that I can see taking two very different directions at this point. Like if sailing fails, it's going to go in a very different direction to if sailing passes. It needs to be a part of it if it passes. Maybe some weird and wonderful ones as well. Like who's to say that sailing couldn't feature in other quest series that may not immediately be obvious that it would fit into.
Yeah, definitely pirates. Like those need to be like the key thing. I was always thinking like if sailing did come out, this is like years ago. I remember thinking like there's that pirate ship and like the pirates hide out deep wilderness, and I was thinking how cool would it be if like you could be out in the open waters like 60 plus wilderness just battling each other out in the open seas. Like, oh my gosh, I'm very excited for sailing. Do you worry about sailing, by the way? Especially in regards to like just changing the game fundamentally, potentially.
I think it's it's a risky one. Like it's a delicate one. Like of any new skill, like it's something we've never done before. We've tried before. It's failed multiple times, and like it's something that everyone is very cautious of. Players are cautious of it. That's why they voted no to the last few attempts. We're cautious of it as well. Like but it feels like we are that this is the right time, sort of thing. That like we've we talked earlier about how like the last time sailing was polled as a skill, like was in the same era, sort of like that first Zeah launch and stuff like that. And obviously, had sailing launched, it'd have been an absolute disaster. And that would have been again, so it was just, probably no fault on the team themselves. I mean, they'd have had great ambition, but would not have had the resources to make it happen. Old School's in a different place right now, and like we've seen like with updates we've done recently that there's budget there to back up that ambition now, and that there's like with sailing, or indeed if sailing fails and we try another skill instead, like whatever it ends up being, that there is a lot of good reason to sort of like believe that it would not go that way, that like that ambition can be backed up now by the tools and technologies we have. And I think a good example of this is on the topic of sailing. Like one of the first things people said when sailing was sort of like the one that moved forward to if I forget the name of it, like the ideation stage, was straight away one of the big bits of feedback was you don't have the tech to do this, Jagex. You can't do
Mm.
this. Old school is old school. And then they like our engine guys put together like a few prototypes. And these are just prototypes, like not like still very rough around the edges. But even just a few quick prototypes just showed that we could do it. There's actually technology there that could be used. And I think that sort of things like that, like once upon a time, like even a few years ago, Old School didn't have its own dedicated engine team. Like we were using the same engine that had was the one from sort of like 2007, and if we wanted anything new, we just had to terribly and awkwardly try and work around it on our end, and that's how we end up with so many weird things in game that just kind of half semi work, but now we get a lot more engine support, and like we can, with their help, we can do like all these cool and unique things. So like it presents so many opportunities that just weren't there before, and it's maybe another one of those things where it's sort of like it's maybe a good thing to a certain extent that all our previous attempts at a skill failed, because in doing so they've hopefully set us up in a place to, if this one passes, to succeed.
What out of the 3 skills that were proposed, which one did you want personally to pass?
So I've got to admit, and like, it's very awkward. So obviously, sailing being the one that passed it. I wasn't actually in the sailing boat initially. Like I was actually quite keen on shamanism personally. I wasn't sold on the name, I'll admit, but that was actually the one that I was more keen on. So no, I wasn't actually. Don't get me wrong, I still liked the idea of sailing, but it wasn't my favorite out of the pitches. But honestly, to be honest, like all the stuff the team's put together so far, they're managing to slowly convince me on sailing.
Shamanism, I mean, I can definitely understand why you would want shamanism, especially with like the switching reality or the switching worlds, like the underworld or whatever.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like a bit of a bias for me because it's definitely of the 3, it's the one that straight away immediately stuck out as like the most like narrative potentials. But of course, that said, like as we were sort of just saying, there's actually a huge amount of narrative potential with sailing as well. They've done well, and like so far, like the team working on that, they've already been delving into all that stuff a fair bit. So there's a lot of stuff about sailing that does still really excite me, especially like what we were just saying, like potentially do things like pirates and stuff like that. There's so much cool stuff we could do.
Obviously, I pretty much already know the answer to this, but how much does the team really, really want sailing to pass? Is it pretty much like a unanimous consensus that you all want sailing to pass on the team?
I don't know. I do think it does vary a little bit. Like, ultimately, like for the old school team, like a lot of people on the team are still like massive players. Like a lot of people on the team like play the game loads. So there's always that little bit of conflict for some people on the team of it. What hat are they wearing today? Are they wearing their I'm a member of the old school team hat, or I'm a player of old school RuneScape hat sort of thing, and like that conflict. So I don't. I do think it's probably a couple of people on the team who are maybe a bit more cautious of it. I think there's in general, like I think the team is pretty unanimous that in that desire for a new skill. I think there might still be some people who might have preferred the other options. Like I say, I was personally not completely sold on sailing originally. So I don't know. I don't actually know how everyone on the team would vote for it. And I guess also the cheat answer is that ultimately like I see conspiracies on Reddit and stuff like that. So people are going to put it in. People are going to put it in no matter what. And like, honestly, like, definitely not. Like, like I say, there's a few people on the team who I think like there is like differing opinions on the team on this sort of thing. And like, oh, they want a skill, want a different one. They want to do a skill if it's the right one, that sort of thing. So I don't know. I'd say it's fairly unanimous, but not still some differing opinions.
In regards to conspiracies, I'm surprised there's still talk about that stuff. Like the only conspiracy that I would have like believed in fully is if warding passed. I was like, because this is back when like the poll results were hidden as well, so it almost just seemed like this is, or no, they weren't. Wait, were they hidden at that time? Oh no, you guys decided to hide them right then, I believe, on the poll of warding, I believe. And I was like, if this passes, there's something shady going on. And then when it didn't, I was like, okay, you know what? Jagex is being honest. They're being honest with all these polls.
Yeah, like whenever anyone comes up with one of those conspiracy theories, the one I always point to is, and it was around a sort of similar time period as the warding poll. It was that partnerships poll, like because that obviously all of our polls drive business decisions. They're all about to a certain extent. There's always a certain level of money in there. Like talking that sort of thing, Jagex is a business. We need to make money, like pure and simple. But that one was obviously completely different in that was a poll that was really primarily about a business decision. Like from a Jagex standpoint, it's like this is something that has the ability to make quite a reasonable amount of money in partnership with some very big players in the games industry and beyond. And Jagex put that choice in the hands of the players. The players voted no, and Jagex honored that. Like,
Yeah, that's
there is
crazy.
no reason to like ever believe in any polling conspiracies after that. Like, it's ludicrous. Like, if Jagex, because I don't know, I wonder if maybe some people sort of like misunderstand like some of the more businessy sides of things. That sort of like, oh, Jagex have forced this thing through, Jagex forced that thing through. I'll be completely frank. Jagex don't give a flying fuck about what passes the polls the vast majority of the time. If one thing fails the poll, like we'll just go design something else and develop something else that people do want instead. Like
Hmm.
it's to our benefit. Like if things fail the poll, that suggests that people didn't want that. It wouldn't make us as much money. Like
Yep.
it's not even like if people say, "Oh, there's a conspiracy. Jagex trying to make as much money as possible." Like yes, Jagex is a company. Jagex wants to make as much money as possible. That part isn't actually a conspiracy. It's true that companies want to make money, but like Jagex doesn't make money by forcing things into the game that the paying customers don't want. Like so, something failing a poll. Jagex are not going to particularly care about that because we'll just come up with something else that will pass a poll, and as a result, like it's likely to be something that will actually be more beneficial both to the players but also to the business as well because it'd be more successful because it's something people want. Like
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's silly. Like maybe once upon a time in the early days there's a reason to have those conspiracy theories, but yeah, after things like that partnerships poll for Jagex to abort a business deal with a huge third party over what people have voted for on an in-game poll, like. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a bloody person to have to explain that to said third parties. Like, hey, sorry, we're not going forward with our deal because our customers voted in a poll and said no. Like, that's ludicrous. No other business in the world does that. Like
Literally.
that does. Yeah, we were talking a lot about polls earlier. This is the good stuff when it comes to polls. This is like these are the positive sides of it. But like that level of power is pretty much unmatched, and I think some people maybe don't realize that of just how impactful it was that players were able to vote no to that sort of thing. And that's one of the real benefits of the polling system. And yeah, there's no reason to have a conspiracy theory. You can have conspiracy theories about all sorts of things. Some of them are probably true, but the polling system, nah.
Yeah. I mean, even because I remember years ago when the dual arena was a big thing. And I was even under the I was starting to just start getting into those conspiracies that Jagex will never remove the dual arena because it's just too profitable for them. And lo and behold, they got removed, and I was like, okay, like they do listen to their players, and I think it's really cool. I got to bring this up just because you're a JMod, and there was another question on it by somebody else. But like, what are your thoughts on botting in the game? And it seems as though there's almost like an influx of it. It seems like it's like almost getting out of hand in certain places.
So it's another one where, to be honest, I'm again probably in a situation where I'm quite lucky in that, you know, my primary job is to tell stories, which is thankfully pretty far away from botting and stuff. So like honestly, my concerns around botting are actually probably far more like player concerns, I guess, than necessarily as a member of staff. Because like, I'm probably on the Jagex side of the work side, I was not particularly exposed to it. So um, like I do personally think that you know that when you look back at like RuneScape's history, there's a recurring theme for a lot of it. One of like the biggest risks to the game, and bots often seem to be pretty near the top of that list. And so on one side of me, I'm sort of like, I do think bots are a big risk, they're a big problem, and like, but then on the flip side, I was sort of like, we've been having this conversation since forever. Everyone's been claiming that bots are going to kill the game since the dawn of time. It's been a problem that's been in the game pretty much since forever, and they've not done it so far. So on the flip side, like, I do sometimes feel that some people maybe over exaggerate the problem a little bit, like. Obviously, it's hard to say. Like whenever people internally talk about it, people more in the know. Like the impression I get is always that there is nothing major to be concerned about. But like, yes, it's a problem, but it is a problem that has always existed. It's an endless battle that Jagex is always fighting. Um, but when sometimes you see on Reddit, so it's like, oh, the botting problem is getting worse, and like, maybe not. Like, not necessarily. Like, it's a problem that's always existed and probably always will exist. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a very sort of like middle of the ground kind of cheaty answer. Like, I don't like it. I think it's a problem. It concerns me, but at the same time, like, it's existed since forever and it's not killed the game yet.
Yeah, I mean, no, and this is obviously not your concern. It's no individual's concern anyway. The reason I bring it up is because I mean, I'm pretty much that Reddit poster that I actually do think it's gotten like more out of hand recently. And it's simply like maybe it's the fact that I don't know, it just gets brought up more and people are more aware of it for some odd reason, and that's, just the exposure that it gets makes me notice it more. But I don't know, it's just like it feels like that is a big part of like this game's integrity and the game's health, is to really talk about that and to really try to like do all we can about it. And I feel the reason I like bring it up and I have a problem with it is because it seems like there's actually ways to handle this kind of stuff and it's not being addressed and it's not being talked about. Like, for example, just the report button alone. It doesn't feel like anybody really uses the report button anymore. I mean, there's obviously people use the report button still, but the people I talk to don't even report people anymore because they don't feel like it does anything. And they feel like it's just wasting their time trying to report people. So now there's this culture going around the game that's like, we don't even report people anymore because it doesn't look like Jagex cares as much. And again, this is not your problem, so I'm bringing it up only just to address it because it weighs on my mind, is like the things that we could be doing to help with botting, and it's just kind of going under the rug. And yeah, I don't know, it's a concern of mine. I feel like the game's integrity, like the RuneScape as a whole, like relies on like the flex, and like you want to flex your achievements to people, and when those achievements get undermined by robots, it just doesn't feel as good. And I feel like that's like a fundamental thing to like really start worrying about. So
Yeah. Yeah, like
yeah.
it's something that like I know like a lot of people on the team sort of like are like concerned about botting or like and I like it's another one that I see a lot of conspiracy theories about, and like as you say, like it sometimes feels like Jagex doesn't care, and obviously it's hard for me to say, like completely different like area from what I work in, but like I've always got the impression internally that like it's something that Jagex do take seriously. So like I don't know, it's a difficult one. Like I definitely don't think like the conspiracy theory that some people talk about sometimes, like, oh well, Jagex actually allow the bots because it makes them more money. Like I've never really seen anything to suggest that would be true.
I mean, that is actually confusing. Like that whole conspiracy is confusing anyway, because it feels like, wouldn't you be making more money by banning them so that they will make another account that's paying membership?
Yeah,
Because
just keep banning them, they keep
yeah.
resubscribing.
I
Yeah.
mean, seriously, like I don't know how all the money's made. Like I don't know if it's like almost like if you ban them too quickly, then they won't remake, so that in turn won't give you membership. I don't understand the whole system, but I think my fear is that if it doesn't get addressed, I feel like just addressing it and really doing something, like as the Jagex team doing something about it and listening to concerns about it, is enough. But my worry is that the culture around the game is like, we don't even care anymore. Like we're so over trying to get this botting situation solved, and it's never going to get solved. Obviously, it's botting; it's a constant war. But like if it doesn't seem like Jagex is caring as much, which that seems to be the case, then players don't care as much, and that in turn just leads to less people caring about it. And then if Jagex sees like, oh well, nobody really cares about botting, then we don't need to do as much. And I feel like the integrity of the game just slowly goes down the bin. So anyway, that's just my negative Nancy input. I'm gonna just add into the cast right now because I always feel the need to talk about it. It weighs on my mind a lot. Yeah. Okay. This is just a little meme thing, but Aiza asks why though, and he says he will understand.
I mean, I understand, but obviously nobody else is going to understand. So just look like complete a weirdo responding to in jokes.
Just leave it at that. We'll
Yep,
never know. Okay. Wales says hit a dab for the culture.
absolutely not.
Okay. So this was brought up. I'm just gonna bring this up because I'm pretty curious. But Ogre asks, what happened to Quest backporting? It was incredibly popular, and he brings up an image showing like some quests. I'll link it to you if you're not on the thread real quick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you have any thoughts on that?
it's one of those really boring answers. Unfortunately, it's sort of like you know, when we put out that poll, this was last year when we put this poll out, like, you know, it came with the caveat. I think there was like a little disclaimer alongside it of, you know, this is not something we are planning to do anytime soon. This is just like, you know, like putting out feelers, basically, like gathering interest, gathering opinions, sort of like build long-term plans, and like, you know, when we do our plans for like content and stuff, like we it varies quite a bit, but we look potentially sometimes up to like 5 years ahead, and it all changes, of course. Everything always changes. You know, we've got a game that's constantly evolving, constantly changing, so the plans change too. So like, it was very much just when it comes to thinking like in the long term, is this something that people would be interested in rather than is this something people want us to do now? That's why I wasn't doing for like the like proper in-game polling system. So yeah, very boring, very non-answer. Sort of like it's something that we wanted to gauge opinion on to potentially use in the future, and just that moment has not yet arrived when we want to use it. Like we'd already at the time of putting this poll out, we already had loads of quests planned, including DT2. We knew what we were focusing on quest wise for the next like few years, and while there's definitely still some appetite for this stuff, like I know I'm quite keen on potentially looking into some of this stuff and like seeing what our own like what would happen if like backported wild Gothic sleeps, like how much do we want to change and stuff like that, that sort of thing. And chosen commanders on there as well. You know, what I mentioned earlier, but potentially I'd want to backport with no changes. So like it's definitely still on the radar. So it's still something we talk about sometimes. It was never like one where there was any immediate plans, and like still isn't. But who knows? You know, maybe soon we'll start to see more of this stuff. Now we've got DT2 out of the way. We're starting to look a bit more at what like that was a big quest. Like I say, we were thinking about for 3 years. Now it's time to start thinking about what the next few years look like. And it would not surprise me if a few of these became part of that.
Very cool. What are your thoughts on people that spacebar quests?
It depends. Like, I guess part of it comes back to what we were on about earlier when we were talking about like, you know, third-party clients, spreadsheets, all that sort of thing of like, if someone's paying their like however bloody much it is per month, for, like if they want a space bar, they've paid for that right to space bar, and like that's ultimately, you know, it's their choice. And like the thing I want is I want people to enjoy the game and enjoy the quests. And if reading the dialogue means you enjoy the quest less, I think you might have something wrong with you, but like that is ultimately your choice. Like you do that. Like you enjoy the game how you want to enjoy it. The thing that I do think it's a shame, and like I say, I think like how could you like not want to like experience like get the full experience of it? But if you want to do that, cool, whatever. Like the thing that does bother me about it, I must admit, is like when people say things like I spacebarred through the quest and I found it boring. It's like,
Uh,
you know, no shit, you found it boring. You skipped half of it. Like, you you can't say the quest was boring if you chose not to engage with it. It's like I must admit, people say things like that. That does bother me a little bit. It's sort of like
yeah.
you've made a choice not to fully engage with it. It's like if you went to the cinema and like you like I don't know like watched half a film and then like just nipped out, did a phone call and came back in. It's like, oh, I missed a bit and I don't know what's going on, sort of thing. Like if you choose not to fully engage with something, like you can't then get upset that it's not been as interesting. It's like people who say that they do bother me a little bit. So like that was entirely your choice. I didn't force that upon you. You chose not to take an interest. Then you can't then say it's not interesting. And I think the other one is people going, oh, I spaced through the quest and now I don't know what to do next. It's like, well, that's on you. Like, you've spacebarred. Like the dialogue specifically told you what to do. Also, half the time it's irrelevant anyway because we put it in the quest journal as well. So like, read your quest journal, read your dialogue, and you'll know what to do.
Hmm.
So I must admit, people say for some of those things that does bother me a little bit. 'Cause it's sort of like they've made a choice, and then it's sort of like you've made your choice, but you're now not happy with the outcome of that choice. But if someone is like fully accepting of it, it's like I don't care about the narrative. I think I don't. It does not interest me whatsoever. I'm going to spacebar through everything, like, and I'm not going to moan about it afterwards. Like, I think it's a shame, and I'd always encourage people to like give it a go. You might be surprised, but on the whole, like that's their choice. Like if they want to do that, like that's the experience that they are paying for.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great take. So that probably is in the same lines as Quest Helper. Just same thing. Is that your opinion with the same thing as like you're paying for the game, so whatever, use Quest Helper, but you probably don't actually encourage it.
There's a thing about Quest Help is like there's some parts of it that actually I can really like quite get behind.
Mm.
I'll openly admit like our game is quite old, and as a result, some parts of it are not particularly user friendly. And as you get the debates constantly of like how much qual is too much and when does it stop becoming old school. And like personally, my take on it is quite relatively moderate take, I think, in that for me, old school isn't necessarily about janky gameplay mechanics and that sort of thing. For me, old school is about sort of the bigger stuff. Like old school is old school because it doesn't have MTX, doesn't have EOC, it doesn't have daily activities, those kinds of things. Those are the things that are why old school is old school for me more so than things like oh, it has to retain this same janky right-click behavior from 2004. Otherwise, it's getting feeling too much like a modern game. The jank is part of it. I've never really been in that category,
Me
so
neither.
so like, a lot of the stuff that Quest Helper offers, I kind of get behind. Like some of like the little like qual features it gives you, I'm sort of like, yeah, cool, that's pretty neat. And to be honest, I would quite like to see us add some of those to the game properly in future, so people don't have to rely on a plugin to access that sort of thing. I think it's just quite cool stuff. It's not doing anyone any harm, and like a lot of it's optional anyway. Like you don't even need to engage with it if you don't want to. People still have the option to opt into the classic janky behavior they want to. Some things obviously I'm a bit more mixed on, like when it starts solving puzzles for you. Then at that point, I'm a bit like, oh, it's pushing it a bit. But I think then at that point, yeah, we sort of fall into the same argument of what I just said. Of sort of like, I would always encourage people to give it a go first. Like you don't know what you might be missing if you don't try it. But ultimately, like if you prefer, if you're not a fan of like the kind of puzzles we do in our quests and stuff like that, they're not for everyone. Like if you'd prefer to use Quest Help to solve them, sure thing, whatever. And I've have had some people say to me before that thanks to Quest Helper, they actually engage with the dialogue and story more now than before because Quest Helper
Mm.
lets them skip past the bits they don't like. They don't like the puzzles and stuff like that. It's not for them. Like that kind of thing isn't for everyone. Some people love them, but like some people are saying like it's not for me. I don't like it. And they before those things made Quest feel so tedious and so chore that it made me lose interest in the story. Maybe want to like spacebar through that and stuff like that. But by having Quest Helper to help me solve the puzzles, it's actually given me a new interest in the story and the lore. Like, I've had people say that to me. It's sort of like,
Okay.
okay,
Okay. There's a
fair,
silver
fair
lining.
enough. Like, yeah, I get where you're coming from, sort of thing. Like, not everything is for everyone, sort of thing. And if it's making you enjoy a different part of a quest more, then yeah, I can kind of see where you're coming from there.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's a great take. It would definitely do that. I personally have never used Quest Helper yet. It's just I've just been I mean I don't even know when Quest Helper came out, but I've been playing on this one account for like 6+ years now. So whenever it did come out, I will complete the quest before there ever is a Quest Helper. So one of these days I'll make a new account and I'll get to enjoy all that quality of life I think it's quality of life in my opinion. I've never been an avid quester. I know I shouldn't even admit that, but Desert Treasure 2 was something special. My favorite quest, by the way, still is Monkey Madness 2. And that's like an odd take. A lot of people didn't actually like Monkey Madness 2 because of like the barge, I think. But I love
Yeah,
that quest.
Monkey Madness 2 is an interesting one for me because like got a confession here. Like,
Okay.
when I play the game on my personal account, admittedly, I don't actually play too much these days. But when I do play for requests, pretty much every quest is one I've created, And if it's not one I've created, I've probably at the very least like played it a few times internally, like be maybe part of some review processes for it and that sort of thing, and still had some involvement in it. So me, I hold down spacebar on everything. I don't want to read through the dialogue that I read through 500 times while writing it. I also definitely don't want to read through my own stuff because it's sort of like I just cringe it. It's sort of like, oh, it's my own work. I don't like that. I don't like looking at my own work. So when I'm playing through quests, I hold down spacebar on absolutely everything. So Monkey Madness 2 is actually, I think, like the last quest that I probably played through legit because it's the last quest that I wasn't involved in because it was the one. It literally came out like a week before I joined the company.
Damn. So what did you think of it? Did you like it?
Um, Very up and down, I think.
Yeah.
I
I think for
it
me,
was one of the,
yeah. No, go for it. Go for it.
it was obviously the first one for Old School, and it's sort of like where they were still trying to like work out what questing should be in Old School, and indeed, like for a lot of the quests that I worked on afterwards, we're still sort of trying to work that out. Like, where are the lines between like nostalgia, kind of what we were just talking about? Where are the lines between nostalgia and frustration? So many Old School quests, so many of the old quests, there's a lot of frustration, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
debate and argument out where they need to be frustrating. And like Monkey Madness 2 is definitely one of those ones that sort of like it very much sat on that line. It's still trying to work out like how much frustration is okay. And like obviously different people have very different takes on this. It's sort of like some people go like the frustration is important. It's what makes it old school, and it means that by the time you get to the end, it's what helps with that feeling of satisfaction of like I survived the frustration. Like and personally, like, and I've definitely made the mistake of doing that. I think myself in especially some of my earlier quests, and I think you'll probably like people probably see that like my quests have evolved over the years, and that I've moved a lot more towards, I guess, more traditional difficulty. I've in a lot of my quests, especially the harder ones, like we were talking about earlier with DT2, the bosses get amped up. We've got harder bosses now. Maybe some of the puzzles are more challenging, but a lot of the frustrations are starting have maybe disappeared. Like for one thing that people probably notice for Desert Treasure 2 is that you don't actually have to bank very often. If you're banking, it's purely probably like for the fights and stuff. There's very few places where you have to like actually go collect items. A lot of the items are given to you in the areas and stuff like that.
That was nice. That was really nice.
So like, there's definitely been a shift in attitude there, and that's sort of like where I personally sit now on that sort of thing of I want the difficulty to come from the actual content itself. So I want challenging puzzles, I want challenging bosses, I want that to be where the difficulty to come from. I want that to be the thing that people like struggle with a bit. So when they get to the end, they feel like real sense of achievement. I've killed this boss, I've done it. Rather than it's frustrating because just because it's frustrating. Like take Song of the Elves for example. Like obviously there's still some controversy with Song of the Elves regarding the bloody library, but I'd hope that people can still sort of see that even though the library is probably not perfect, there's definitely a lot of things I do differently about it now. That it was what it was trying to do was very much take the puzzle from the previous quest, like Morning's End Part 2, that light puzzle. And it was very much like if we took the light puzzle, if we got rid of the shadows, if we did some like qual features, like made the mirrors stackable, so like you're not worrying much about inventory management and that sort of thing, like would the light puzzle be more enjoyable? And I think even today, the verdict may still be out on that one. I get some people tell me they absolutely love it. They think it's like the light puzzle in Morning Part 2, they say like that light puzzle would have been fun if not for things like the shadows and stuff like that, and Song of the Elves perfected that. And I get some people say to me they absolutely adored the puzzle. And I get some people come and say to me, what the fuck were you thinking? Like, everyone hated Morning's End Part 2, and you went and did it again? Like...
It's one of those things where you just can't please everyone, because some people just do not want to do the puzzle. They just want to get the quest over with. So
yeah.
I feel like those are the people that are saying, why did you do this again to us? And I'm
So,
probably halfway stepped into that category.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely something that's evolved over the years. And yeah, Monkey Madness 2, like, there's some things that were great about it. There's obviously, like, for me, it has its own sort of, I guess, a little bit of nostalgia now. It's the last quest I did that was actually experiencing it as a player rather than a member of staff, and I've not had that since. But there's definitely some elements that we definitely probably wouldn't do it that way now. Like, there's some bits that lean too heavily into let's make it frustrating rather than let's make it fun.
The reason it was so good for me is I didn't fail the barge. The barge I did it one and done. I don't know how I did it, but for some reason, I think part of it is like just knowing that other people had a rough time and I didn't, and that made me like think the quest was even better than it was because I had a good time doing it. And then, of course, I was like really early to slash mid game, and unlocking demonic gorillas was just so cool. I thought they were like such a cool encounter to have, like post quest. I thought that was really neat. So, a little biased. Okay, so I want to just ask you one last question before we wrap things up, and that is, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, or where would you like to be?
Ooh. I mean, a lot can change in 5 years, but
Oh yeah,
I, I don't think I'm done yet. I think I'm in a good place right now. Like one thing that like I've been in Jagex quite a few years now. Like I was saying earlier, like 6 to 7 years. Like there's a fair amount of time. Obviously, there's plenty of people who've been in Jagex a lot longer, but I read some statistics a while back that apparently, on average, in the games industry, people only spend 5 years in the games industry and only 2 years at a single games company. But turnover in the games industry is actually pretty damn high, and that sounds pretty believable to us from some of the things I've seen. But so by those numbers, I'm apparently one of the old guys, which
you're ancient.
you wouldn't bloody think so of a guy in his late 20s, but um, but no, I don't think I'm done yet. Like being at JX that long, it's fair to say, there's been some ups and downs. We won't get into the details here because that's all confidential stuff. But like you spend that long at a company, you're gonna have some bad times, you're gonna have some good times. Like,
Yeah.
but I think we're in a really good place right now with the old school team and with the stuff we're doing. There's a lot to be excited for the future, and there's been times where, to be completely frank, that I wasn't so too sure on that. There's been times in old school's history and something like things are a bit iffy at the moment, but things are looking really promising right now. Like even if like the skill fails, like the fact that we're sort of now having these conversations about this sort of stuff, it's really exciting stuff. There's like this big ambition here. Like even if a skill does fail, that ambition will only be rediverted into something else awesome. Like there's so many cool things happening, and current old school leadership is really getting behind like narrative in particular as well, which is obviously really appealing for me. Like that, like Desert Treasure 2 was the first Grandmaster quest in 4 years. It felt for a while after Song of the Elves that maybe there was a bit of the from like the Jagex as a company wasn't maybe as interested in questing, but it feels like that has sort of come back a bit now. They've let us do Desert Treasure 2. They let us go really wild and ambitious with it and do some things that we probably would never have normally been allowed to do. And so far, fingers crossed, it stays that way. The response has been fairly positive, and that can only mean good things for more awesome storytelling in the future. Like so, in 5 years' time, my hope is that I will have been able to have really, I guess the real hope to answer is actually I want to be able to conclude a few stories. We've done it once with Song of the Elves. That's the only quest that we've concluded, and we're now in a really good place, I think, to get some of these storylines finished with hopefully some really satisfying endings. And in 5 years' time, I want to be able to say that we have capped off some storylines with some really awesome finales.
I love that. Moded, this was awesome. I'm really glad I got to talk to you today. This has been like, definitely been one of those guests that I've been looking forward to and getting on for quite a bit. So thank you for your time today, man.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. For those still watching after all this time, it's almost been 3 hours. Down in the description, you can go drop Moded a follow on Twitter. Is there anything else you'd want linked, by the way? Or is that pretty much it?
Nah. Twitter until no, I shouldn't say anything about the death of Twitter. Nope, just Twitter.
Dude, quick thing. I'm genuinely considering hopping off the platform, but it's so hard to like just it's just one of those things where it's like I don't even go on Twitter anymore. It's just to post my thing, and I'm like, is there a better place I can post? It's not even Twitter anymore. It's X. Like I don't know what's happening. So, but I'll have your link down. I'll talk about that in another ramble or something like that.
Yeah, I must admit I don't use Twitter that
Okay.
much, and but we've all been using it for so
I
long
know,
now.
that's the
But, like
problem.
it's sort of like the song. It's been sort of like, oh, that's the main way of JMods, like of interacting with JMods one on one through their Twitters. But
I
like, yeah,
know.
so I don't even know what we do without it. Like,
Yeah,
but yeah, who knows?
it's the same thing with me. It's like I've just been so I'm like almost held back by just removing it entirely because I just do topics and stuff through the Sae Bae cast on Twitter. So yeah. But yeah, that's a story for another day, I guess. But Modad, thank you very much once again. And next week, guys, we are going to be having, oh crap, who is it? I think we're getting Soup on next week. So I'm excited for that. He's the creator of Gillinor Games, and very excited to talk to him for the first time. So look forward to that. And yeah, thank you again, Modad, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.